everybody, and welcome to this edition of Psiccast. I'm your host, Robert Mercy, and I am joined here with Bill Montana.
Hey, what's happening?
Good, Bill. So we're going to do another Psiccast, and I just want to let everybody know that we're still continuing to do Psiccast, but with our crazy schedules, it's hard to do it every week right now at this point. But we do need your help. So if you wanted to donate, to this for this production, if you send in at least $20, then you get a free recording, and it's on a undiscovered venue. If I remember correctly, I forget what we called it. I believe it was Hidden Venues.
Hidden venue. Yeah, it was a hidden venue. Yeah. Pretty cool stuff.
A hidden venue. Really cool stuff. So, and Bill, and right now we got a lot of products going on. If you go to skywardmagic.com, SKYWARD magic.com, then you will find a lot of Bill's works on there and mine.
Yeah, I got about 20 up. Tom's still putting new stuff on the side all the time, so.
Yeah.
It's not up now. It'll be up in a couple of days. He's busy, too, so.
Yeah, exactly. So
and remember, if you're a creator, it's only 10% fee, which is minimal, you know?
Yes. So go to that site and get it, and you will see a lot of products.
Yeah, even buying work helps us do this.
Exactly. So.
And if you're on my Facebook group and pages, you can see some of the sale items I got going on right now. I'm clearing out some of the collection.
Yeah.
Okay, so tonight we're going to get into a very, very complex and kind of crazy and dark subject called the history of mentalism.
All right.
Now, I'm going to cover several aspects. And most of what I'm going to cover tonight is completely unknown to most of you. Okay? I'm not going to be polite. I'm going to give you the facts. I'm going to give you the information on who is who tonight primarily. A lot of this can be source information tonight. I know it's a little dull and boring, but it'll also give you time, when I mention these people again, you'll know who they are. Now, this won't all be covered in one night, right? It's impossible. And it's multiple stories that kind of seem to merge together to create what would later become mentalism, okay? So we're going to look at each one of these little separate offshoot threads that kind of join in that set up this foundation for mentalism. Now, I will be primarily focusing on American mentalism, okay? Now, there were works that were published in places like India, London, various Manchester and stuff like this, in the UK and elsewhere, Paris particularly, that did have an impact on some of the other people that wrote books that led to the eventual rise of mentalism in this country. Okay? Now, I got to try to make some of this really clear. It's not at all what you thought. It got whitewashed. Well, by the 40s and 50s, 60s, it was whitewashed by the Al Baker gang. Okay? We'll get into them later. And we're going to get into Houdini later. Okay? Because right now I'm going to try to focus on the principal source information that comes out of several different groups, and then we're going to get into some other connections, okay? And most of this stuff you can look up and document yourself, okay? This is all printed information. The reason I like the old printed information is very simple. It's fact, okay? We're not making it up. Now, I gotta make this clear too. We have many different societies involved with foundations of mentalism, and these also cover into the birth of the New Age movement, psychotronics, radionics, and more. Okay, but all that is basically early mentalism at some point. Where it offshoots into that by the 50s and 60s, it'll offshoot into that. Okay. I'll try to explain this as I go along, but this is a lot of information. Okay? You guys with me so far?
Uh-huh.
Now, I'm not going to give you all the names on the list because the names are literally about 194 pages worth. But I am going to call out a lot of key participants that had a lot of effect on, some of it was on early mentalism, some of it was on, became by the 80s and 90s into bizarre magic, okay, and other stuff, and which would later be all developed under the fringe categories. So this should be interesting. But a lot of this, what I'm going to cover, relates to the works of guys like Claude Conklin, Alexander, the Baldwins, or Baldwin, I should say Baldwin, Raymond, and a few of the other mentalists that were running during the 20s and 30s, okay? As well as some animal stuff and stuff like that. Now, I'm not going to get a lot into a lot of the animal stuff for this simple reason. Most of the time when you say animal, the fucking mentalists lose their goddamn mind. Animal. You know, that's all they done. Their brains get closed and dead. So we're not even going to get into that. You understand what I'm talking about there, Robert? Yeah, so we're not even going to get into that. All right?
Yeah.
And my accordion, wake up.
Yeah, wake up, people.
It's far more dark and bizarre than you could possibly even freaking imagine. Now, the first thing I want to do is I want to cover some of the officers and editors and some leaders of different movements. Now, the information I'm using is coming from Hartman, who wrote a Who's Who in the Occult and Psychic and Spiritual Realm. So the reason I'm using Hartman, 1925, there I happen to have it, and it's also a good catalog of all the people before 1925 that play significant different aspects of this, okay? Now, early in 1925, our story actually goes back to the 1600s, but I'm going to start in 1925 because it's a little bit more current, and some of these names you may actually know, others you may actually know from your history class, and others you probably never heard of. And I'll try to explain a little bit about why they're important as we go along, but some of these will be just to give you alternative terms, okay?
Uh-huh.
That you may not have heard before, because these are the old terms listed in the books. So there's really a lot of what I'm going to go through in the next, 20 or so minutes. It's going to be kind of boring and statistical data type stuff, as in list categories, bibliography notes, and so forth. However, this stuff becomes really important later on, and when you start seeing those connections, you'll be able to do your own research and find the exact connection for the particular foundations of the effect or the piece you want to find, right?
Right.
Now, we're going to start with a lady named Diana Abbott. Okay. Let me also say some of these people are connected to some of the other people, but not always. I may or may not tell you who is connected and who isn't. So you'll have to use your imagination there. Like Diana Abbott could be related to the Abbott family as in Percy Abbott, or it could be James Abbott, but I'm not going to go into that, okay? Because we're going to try to focus on some more obscure mental aspects. But Diana Abbott is an interesting one. She was the president of the Occult Research Society that was located at one. She's primarily known as an astrologian. Astrologian is the pronouncing of the spelling of that. It's a term for an astrologer that you usually don't see these days. However, that term does appear in a lot of the old books that are listed as the stuff when they're talking about astrologers. They sometimes refer to them as an astrologer. Now, James Abbott is another one, but he comes to us from Chicago, and this is going to be before 1925. James Abbott, primarily you'll see a lot of his stuff, teens, 20s, real early. He was a lecturer, a journalist, and he wrote for something called, he was the editor of something called the Psychic Investigator, which was a he was a psychic investigator. I'm sorry. He was an editor, lecturer, journalist, psychic investigator. He was also the editor of a kind of a news, what we could now call a newsy, and it was a little paper called the National Spiritualist. So he comes up quite a bit because sometimes later on I'll be sourcing information saying, edited by James Abbott. That's who I'm talking about. Okay?
Uh-huh.
Dr. Albert Abrams, A-B-R-A-M-S, he's the guy that basically created the medical radionics that I've talked about before in some of the audio programs. But he is actually the founder of basically radionics and a new way to heal. That'll come back into the mentalism when we get back up into the 70s and 80s. But it comes out in 1925. Frieder Achad, A-C-H-A-C-H-A-D, was an author, lecturer, wrote a lot of works on black magic and so forth. Where he comes into this picture as external AA colloquium ad spirituum sanctum, a lot of Latin stuff. But it's the sovereign sanctuary of the Gnosis. He was the president and founder of something called hang on, some of these terms are terrible. Psychomagica. Psychomagia. Psychomagia. They're basically psychomagic. So when he's doing this stuff and he's founding this organization, there were certain letters written by him, like little newsletters. They were like mini-graphed. They do contain a lot of the concepts that would later become some of the effects in mentalism, but yeah, it's stemming straight out of black magic. Like that, the idea. And we'll get into that later. Another astrologer. I'm gonna try to weed through some of the astrologers. It's a big list, by the way. American Drug Association. Okay, yeah. Raymond Andrea. The ancient and mystical order of the Rosicrucians. This is the Rosicrucians out of England. He was the Grand Secretary. I will be mentioning some Rosicrucian stuff later on, which it does tie into some of the foundations of mentalism. And some of the stuff I'm going to talk about, this guy was the secretary. He's the one that paid the bill on it. So we need to point out some names here. Now, this is one of the first few I'm going to give you for overseas. Constance E. Andrews, who was the editor for a magazine called The Church of the New Age. It's published in Manchester, England. I've never actually seen a copy of that, so you guys in England now know about it. Maybe you can find one. They are fairly scarce, okay? It's going to be a newspaper-type publication. I know that much, but I don't know anything else beyond that. Except that her name does come up in some of the other books, okay? That's the only reason I got a note on it. Yeah, Ernest Atherton, this is an interesting cat. This is another one out of London. He was an initiate into something known as the Brotherhood of the Essenes in England. The Aquarian College of Metaphysics, which was located in Bristol, and a few other things. You'll see Atherton mentioned. There's a couple different Athertons in this story that'll pop up from time to time. They're fairly obscure guys, but it seems that a lot of it seems to stem. This is going to be about 1880, 1890, 1910, from this College of Metaphysics in Bristol, England, by the way. Yeah, this is another one. Henry Werner Austin. He was a manager and proprietor of the Playhouse in 1814, which was located in Washington, D.C. the Playhouse of 1814 North Street, Washington, D.C., sorry. Don't want to get confused. Austin was a guy that they had a theater in Washington, and a lot of the early mentalists, like Alexander, I don't know about Animan, but Raymond and a few others would play his theater, okay? So we'll come back into the story way later. Okay, that's the high. You don't do this. Okay. Now, one of the big proponents of a lot of what you'll see that will later turn into a particular branch of mentalism or get a lot of foundations for the works of mentalism is a lady named Alice A. Bailey, who ran something known as the Lucifer Trust, which later became the Lucis Trust, out of the Theosophical Societies. This is going to be an important chick, okay? She carried on Blavatsky's work. We'll get to Blavatsky later in her little fake ass, but we're not going to get to it now. Yeah, this guy, Pearson Worrell Banning, is kind of one of those cats that I would have really liked to meet, actually. He was born in Chicago on September 13th, 1879. He was an efficiency expert, psychologist, psychic investigator, expert in mental and spiritual healing, metaphysics, and arcane sciences. Did research work for about 30 years. He's the member of the Société Académique des Horticulteurs, which was located, I think, in Paris, and the Academy Latine des Sciences, the arts, and the Belles Lettres. Sorry if my French is terrible. I took French, but I can read, I can't speak it. Yeah, I took a lot. I mean, I took 4 years of French, baked out of my fucking skull.
Yikes.
Yeah, that's how, man, I was so high in that first 2 years of French, I don't even remember the third and fourth. Now, this one, is that him? Yeah, this is another important figure that's going to be playing into our story from time to time. And he's an English guy. He was actually born in Jamaica. He's Sir William F. Barnett. Barnett, turns out, it's an interesting connection here. He was born in 1844, died in 1925. But do you remember Barnett, a little scarcely known mentalist named Barnett that worked in the 50s and 60s? Do you remember him? This was his grandfather.
No.
Yeah, this was his grandfather. Yeah, he was educated at Old Trafford Grammar School in Manchester. At an early age, he became an assistant to Tyndall, who was the professor of the experimental physics at the Royal College of Sciences in Dublin. And the reason I'm pointing this guy out is at this time, the Royal Societies in places like Dublin, England, and so forth were actually doing experimental research into parapsychology topics, but they called it and then they called it the Society for Physical Research. And he's connected to a whole bunch of people. Okay, he might pop back up. Yeah, I know. Some of this is going to be boring, but you got to know this. You got to know who I'm talking about. You know what I'm saying? Because if I mention like William Blake, you know the author, William Blake.
Huh?
Yeah, he was also known as a mystic poet, painter, and author on philosophy and ecstasy and illuminations. Most people don't know about William Blake writing about, philosophy and ecstasy. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. But William Blake will play into this later on, as a couple of the later mentalists would mention William Blake in the dialogues in Patter. Some that's going to be a little bit out of order. Helena Petrovna Blavatsky, Theosophical Society, most of you guys would know about her. The guy you really want to pay attention to was Colonel Henry S. Olcott, Olcott, and William Judge. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
Because these guys are the ones that created Blavatsky. Did you hear what I just said? Helena Petrovich Blavatsky is only a photograph, and there's only about 10 or 15 different photographs of her, yet she's this famous metaphysical socialite that never fucking existed.
Whoa. So
she was actually a creation of Alcott and Judd. They hired some low-class actor. There wasn't even a real name, and they gave her the title of Blavatsky so they could set up a publishing empire. Because at this time, most people wanted to listen to a woman talk about metaphysical medium stuff because it was more believable. It was Alcott, Henry Alcott, and Judge are the ones that created the Theosophical Society. But they used this chick as their patsy. Classic routine. Mentalist and medium, right?
Mm-hmm.
The mentalist is down there talking, what am I holding? Okay? That's where it stems from, is the creation of Blavatsky. Told you it's going to get wild. Because my notes are pretty complete.
Nice.
I'm trying to read this. I'm reading pretty fast here, so hang on. Oh, yeah. Ms. Ernest Benninghoven, Benninghhoven, who is the founder of the Brotherhood of the White Star, or the Order of St. John of Jerusalem. Okay? This is pretty much occult literature. That publications from that little book, right, were set up sometime around the Blavatsky period, and it's almost like, how do I want to say this? I'm going to turn on some AC so maybe some noise. It's a little warm in here. There may be some crossover between networks and some of the stuff that Blavatsky was spewing, like Ascended Masters. Okay? And a whole bunch of other stuff. What's interesting is that comes out of Santa Cruz Company via Wright's P.O. Box in California. Dr. Guy Bogart was a sociological writer and lecturer. He was president and treasurer of the Church of the Dawn. This is about 1910, 1915, somewhere right in that area.
Uh-huh.
He's also one of the big astrologians, there's that term again, in Los Angeles, California. And then later he goes on to work for the Neuropathic Association, which is an early medical association for the brain. He actually had a PhD. But you'll see Bogart and some of his interjecting of his philosophies from this Church of the Dawn thing into some of the other groups that we'll talk about a little later.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I know. Some of this is going to get wild, dude. And I'm trying to. I've got complete records here. I'm trying to get rid of a lot of the European references, like Bonanzio, who was an Italian psychic investigator that picked up the trail after Houdini, when Houdini broke. But Bonanzio's got that's it. I mean, that's the entire footnote for Bonanzio, Italian psychic investigator, right?
Uh-huh.
But more likely, Bonanzio does turn back into the program a bit, where he wrote some crap on ITC, intertrans communication, which later became EVP.
Mm-hmm.
His Bonanzio is where we get some of that information from. Although Bonanzio doesn't actually get credited as much as he should. You know what I'm saying? So it gets a little bit interesting, actually. For you Australian guys, you can look up a guy named Walter Blake as a medium author and writer and verifier of psychic phenomena. He's the founder of the Secretary of the Australian Society of Physical Research. Okay, the Australian Society of Physical Research, right there. Walter Blake. The society, he was also, interesting side note, he was a South Australian Association occultist and spiritualist in cooperation with Mrs. Alma Phillips, founder of the Adeline Spiritualist Church in Prospect, Australia. Interesting cat, although that stuff doesn't necessarily pertain to the American side of mentalism, but it does pertain to a lot of the stuff coming out of the Australian end, right? Because a lot of his writings, especially from the physical research, a lot of this will be physical research data. Physical research was the academic term for paranormal studies in the 1800s. They're about 1930, but right now we're all pre-1925. William Bryan. Yeah, he was a spiritual writer and medium. Worked out in New York. Dr. C.A. Burgess was the vice president of the Lilydale Association in 1925. That's the spiritualist community. A lot of these guys that I'm going to give you tonight, we'll talk about, they don't turn up in a lot of the histories. Okay, a lot of them get brushed over. But he was actually the president of the Charter of Lilydale, VP. And the reason you want to pay attention to this is because what I'm going to try to teach you, first thing is how to check your facts. Okay? Chandra, how many of you guys heard of Chandra, the magician, mentalist? Dr. B.A.B. Chandra? Yeah, we're called the Golden Tie. He was out of India, so anybody listening from India, there's an Indian connection. Chimpoti, he was an author of a Vedic magazine, and I don't even know how to pronounce that. I'm not even going to try. Kurakola Samachar? Does that make any sense to you guys over there? Lashore, India is where he was at. Yeah, George Cheney. Yeah, this guy. He was the author of Universal Books, Foundations of the Mahanama School in Enterprise in Long Beach, California. Actually, if anybody's listening from Long Beach, California area, it's 362 Ximeno Avenue. Ximeno Avenue. I don't know how to pronounce that. Ximeno Avenue. That's in Long Beach, California. If somebody could take a photo of that on their phone and send it to me, that'd be awesome. Of what that building actually looks like. Because this guy, that was the home of Universal Books, and there's really not much known on him. I got a little fun out here. It's kind of an obscure character, but since we're going nationwide, we can, or worldwide, we can talk about some of these things. Yeah, I don't want to get into him yet. No, I have too much nice things to say about him. But let's talk about Hayward Carrington. The infamous Hayward Carrington that wrote all the books on metaphysics. Yeah, he was a mentalist, people. Or at least tied to a lot of the lecturers that were mentalists. What we now call an open eye. PhD author, lecturer, founder, secretary, and research officer at the American Psychiatric, the American Physical Institute and Laboratory. Later a member of the Council on the American Institute for Scientific Research, member of the Scientific Society for Physical Research, New York, London Geographical Societies. the American Health League, Mike Lavender, the American Encyclopedia. He did write a couple books for Mentalism. Don't do tricks. But yet he's also backed up. And Garrigan, let me talk about this cat for a minute, because I like this cat. He's out on lecture tours, doing it for real, okay, working for these foundations for real, doing real research in these paranormal fields, yet he's a mentalist. What he's teaching these people behind the scenes is he would do a big conference type thing. It was usually a symposium is what they called them back then. I think there's still some symposiums going on now. But he'd come out as the speaker for the Physical Research Society of America. And always on his bill, on his bills, he would have mediums, right, that he found or trained on the bill, presenting mentalism in a very real fashion, which is very different from today when they walk out and go, what you're about to see is not real. It's all fake. No, it's not. There's a lot more evidence. There's a lot more evidence that a lot of this stuff that was done in early mentalism was actually, at some level, real, or at least presented as real to the public, which is a completely different idea than what a lot of people have, later claimed, right?
Uh-huh.
Because why would there be these actual societies for places like physical research, okay, and departments of physical research at universities like Harvard, Yale, Oxford, Edinburgh, if it was all bullshit?
Oh, wow.
Yeah, can somebody tell me that? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Anybody out there? Yeah, that's what I thought. How about Dr. George Carver? This guy's interesting. He's actually a professor of experimental chemistry at the Tuskegee Institute in Alabama, but he's also a fellow of the Royal Society of Great Britain. All right.
Uh-huh.
Do you know what some of the stuff they were doing in experimental chemistry in 1925?
Mm-hmm.
Well, experimental chemistry was taking some of what experimental chemistry was doing, not all of it, but some of it, a very small portion of it, I must say, was looking back into early alchemy to try to figure out what these chemical concoctions were that the alchemists were talking about. And then later it began into nuclear research and this kind of thing. So it got a little bit more valid as it went on. But it has roots in studying of alchemy. We said by the time he's working, chemistry's already known, right?
Uh-huh.
It's already known and perfectly valid, except for experimental chemistry. Experimental chemistry did dive into alchemy the same way experimental psychology dived into paranormal topics, okay?
Okay.
They are connected. But what we're pointing out here is he's working at this time at the Tuskegee Institute, and this is the one that later we give, syphilis to the black soldiers? Yeah, that's Carter. Or some of the work that was later based off Carter. But he's also, a fellow of the Royal Society of Great Britain. Okay? You don't make fellow of Royal Society if you're a crackpot. You see what I'm saying? Even if you do some, shady stuff,
Uh-huh.
Let's get back on to some of these people here. Charles Henry Cochran will pop up in our story a couple of times. As a writer and publisher and lecturer, he went around talking about all kinds of stuff, okay? Cochran and this next guy, Cochran primarily, although Cochran didn't necessarily focus always on the psychic expose but he did do a little bit of that. But he was looking for more mind power kind of stuff, because mind power pops up in about 1920s.
Mm-hmm.
Of how to use your mind to, business type talks and stuff. That's Cochran. Now, this next son of a bitch Dr. Daniel P. Comstock. Oh, yeah, that's the member of the Comstock family. You know, the Comstock lode?
Uh-huh.
You know, for gold? Yeah, psychic investigator out of Boston. Yeah, he goes all the way back to Comstock. He's an offshoot of the Comstock family, but it's all tied in.
Oh, bro.
Comstock,
oh, wow.
The Comstock family and the gold hunting will come back in our story later. F. Constantine, I believe this is France. This is, I don't know why I have that note. It's a National Spiritualist Association. She was also a one-time president of Lilydale. Constantine, fairly well known actually. You'll see her name pop up in some of the histories of Lilydale. Not always, but some of them. You know what I'm saying? Because even at Lilydale, they like to hide a lot of their history. He's just about as shady as it gets. Yeah, Dr. Conwell, Dr. Russell H. Conwell, to be exact, was a long-term Baptist temple preacher or pastor, as I guess they call him in Baptist, in Philadelphia. He was also a philanthropist. What's interesting about this cat, and the reason he's listed here under publishers and editors, Conwell, is a pastor at the Baptist Temple in Philadelphia. Yet he gives some of the money for publications of some physical research. Which, you know, one would think, well, that's a little odd. You know what I'm saying? Because he supported some public publishing houses. Yeah, I got a lot of information from me. You're gonna have to bear with me. I'm gonna stutter a few times. Yeah, another one was Professor John Edgar Cover, Coover. He was the director of the Physical Research Laboratory in Leland, it says Laboratory Leland. There's a note here. Stanford University. He was also one of the authors of Stanford University. Now, why would Stanford University come into this thing for physical research, right, in 1925? Because Stanford Research Institute, which came out of Stanford University, for the remote viewing program.
Oh.
Is that pretty clear? Yeah. I'll give you his name again. Professor John Edgar Coover. Now, remember, this is 1925, so this is definitely before Scientology. Just want to make that clear. And apparently all the guys that were in the early program that were invited in to look at the early program for remote viewing were mostly level 8 OTs in Scientology. Inga Swan, McGonigal, what's the other guy's name? Oh, yeah, Geller, yeah.
All of them.
Geller was there, so Geller at one time had connections to Scientology. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been in that particular remote viewing program. Just saying. Now, I don't know if he still has connections to Scientology. He may or may not have, but at least at that point, he definitely did. Because that's how else are you going to get into the program, right?
Mm-hmm.
Andrea Plutarch, you know, his mentor, and the guy that did the physical research for Peter Hurkos was definitely tied to Scientology, as well as physical research and psychic phenomena. Just saying. There's a connection. Because here's my biggest gripe. Most of the mentalists out there never really went in and looked at any of this stuff, right? They just took James Randi's word for it, right? They never did any of the research. Well, after decades, I can tell you pretty much he's hit. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
and who they work for, where they're at. Yeah, this was an interesting publication. It was called Psychic World. This is 1910, 1920s. It was fairly short-lived. It was a Jenny Dawes. Jenny Dawes was the editor and publisher of it, and it came out of Philadelphia. If you guys ever seen any of that, early copies of that, grab it, because that's going to be some just interesting stuff. Ralph DeBitt. It's a D space B-I-T, DeBitt, who is a practical mystic, author, lecturer, and president of the School of the Sacred Sciences. Some of you people probably heard of that, which is located in Los Angeles, California. Ralph DeBitt, the mystic, he pops up right in between Blavatsky and Houdini exposing of spiritualism. Odd, isn't it?
Uh-huh.
But, he puts himself as a pro. And Ralph DeBitt is kind of like doing the stuff that I do, the mystic energy stuff. In a sense, he's doing a little more, or like the David Hoy College lecture. That's kind of his style, you know what I'm saying, from the stuff I've seen. Ms. Champagne, which her name was D. Crespi, Crespingy, came out of England, psychic researcher, student, author, and lecturer. She's an interesting one, especially for you guys overseas. You'll be able to find her books. We won't be able to find them in this country. There's probably 2 copies in the entire thing. Library of Congress might have one, but outside of that, maybe some buried on some bottom shelf in a university somewhere. I think there's a copy at Cincinnati, but fairly obscure, but goes into psychic life as it relates to spiritualism and spiritual life. It's primarily some of her topics from what I remember. Yeah, and then Eugene Del Mar. You heard of the name Del Mar?
Del Mar, yes.
On the stages, Eugene Del Mar. Yeah, this is one of the relatives. He's a psychologist and a metaphysician. He was born September 6th, 1864, in New York City. Literary and scientific degrees at LLB from the University of California. He was deeply interested in religious problems and beliefs, ranging from progressively from disbelief to agnosticism. Kind of an interesting cat. First connections with the New Thought movement, the mental sciences as presented by the works of William Trine, Muford, Dresser, and Wood, 1889. Most of you will have no idea what that relates to, but it relates to the First Church of Mental Sciences Temple, which those guys basically got together, organized the First Church of Mental Sciences Temple, which was a, how you want to say this, pseudo-religious metaphysical organization, pseudo-scientific metaphysical organization, I guess.
Uh-huh.
Is that how you fit that? It's kind of complicated.
Yeah.
Close. Helen Wheeler's Freedom Weekly magazine, which he was published in there, would later organize the Church of the Living Christ in Denver with James Egerton. Which, by the way, published something called the Common Sense magazine. Remember Common Sense? Yeah, published by Franklin Payne? Yeah. Well, where they got that idea? And Spiritual Science Foundation in New York as well. I mean, he was really kind of an interesting cat because he was all over the place, right?
Mm-hmm.
And related to the New Thought League of the World would be Everett Danner, who was an editor. I'm going to skip ahead a bit because I know some of this is kind of boring, although it is highly interesting. because when we start spelling this stuff out, you'll start to understand what's going down. Durrell, it's mostly English, French, India. Oh, Mary Baker Eddy. Oh, yeah. Mary Baker Eddy. Whew. You ever heard of that name?
Uh-huh. Oh, yeah.
Christian Science, baby. I have a couple of her books on the thing. But what's interesting about Eddy, okay, in December 12, 1843, she marries George Washington Grover. The son was born in 44. Right? That name wouldn't mean anything to you, but it means something here in Dayton, Ohio. Patterson family was one of the big families here that made a lot of stuff for IBM and NCR. And in January 1st, 1877, she marries Gilbert Eddy. That's how she got the name Eddy. Pupil of Felonies Parkhurst Genby, founder of the Christian Science movement, author of Mrs. Eddy Philosophy, for having given the world of the affirmations that God is love and the divine mind governs all. That's where most of that comes from. Okay? Just to give you a brief synopsis on that. That section's kind of long. But yeah, this is all tied to Christian Science. Now, Christian Science, a lot of guys were getting, at one point, were getting Christian Science confused with Scientology. Two separate things. They don't also get them confused with the Religious Society of Friends, which is the Quakers, but it seems to blend together fairly well. Because what you'll end up seeing is, even though I'm covering a lot of different aspects, it's all related. This all gives us the background information for a lot of the stories we tell today, but these stories are told without names and places. Okay? And the stories, therefore, become kind of vague, right? Oh, here's one for you. The Honorable J.W. Edmonds. You New York boys will know who that is. Because he was on the Supreme Court of Appeals of the state of New York, and he was also known as a spiritual investigator. He didn't believe shit. So a lot of the trials, when the guys got brought up on trial, right, in New York, would end up before Honorable J.W. Edmonds. He was a spiritual investigator. Okay, he hated spiritualism, but yet still thought some of it was real. It was really confusing. But you'll see him mentioned when we talk about some of the court cases. Now some of them whipped his ass. Gustav Ekstrom, Ekstrom, I think. It's E-X or E-K-S-T-R-O-M, was an astrologer and lecturer, president of the Minneapolis Astrology Association, primarily known for an early astrology newsletter that came out. This is 1926, 25, 26. Some of his stuff gets quoted by a guy named George Llewellyn, which ended up selling Llewellyn books, by the way. Footnotes, man. Nobody reads the footnotes anymore. You know what I'm saying? A lot of these guys are. Charles Fillmore.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, Charles Fillmore. Well, now, this is only related to that, Charles. As the founder and the president of the Unity School of Christianity in Kansas City. Yeah. But he is related to that. He's related to the other Fillmore that later would create the Fillmore.
Yeah.
So is Lowell Fillmore. Was a magazine editor. He's more closely related to the other Fillmore, by the way. Wiley as opposed to the other one. But they're both connected. George Llewellyn, author, teacher, lecturer, editor. the astrological bulletin, Bulletana, I think is how they call it. I got a couple of his books on astrology. They're actually really good, about 1930. But George Llewellyn was the one that would later start Llewellyn Publishing, that some of our colleagues write for. He's actually a really nice chap from everything I've read. Really, you can say nothing bad about this guy, except he did publish a lot of metaphysical stuff. Okay?
Uh-huh.
The Honorable W.E. Gladstone, which was in England, he was a judge, said physical research is by far the most important work that is being done in the world, meaning psychic research, basically. That was a judge in England. Jesse Fowler, the American Institute of Phrenology. Jesse and L.S. Fowler were both started, father-son kind of thing, started phrenology, studying the bumps on the head.
Uh-huh. Which was later discredited.
It was in the 1880s, though.
No, not in the 1880s. No.
No, but what the idea of phrenology did give away to, okay, is the psychology of predictive analysis of person's behavior.
Uh-huh.
Think about that. Lie detecting.
Right.
I mean, the Fowlers had a lot to do with it. I used to own a copy of O.S. Fowler's work. In the back was a reading thing, reading chart signed by Fowler, and got stolen. That pissed me off. Truth magazine, his career. I don't want to get into him. That's English. I really wish I would have separated this out, but that's all right. Yeah, here's an interesting one for you guys in Germany. Fritz Grunewald, Grunewald. He was an insider and physical researcher in Charlottenburg, Germany. Died in 1925. He's going to be an early one to look up and find some interesting stuff on. Alamar Harding, Ph.D. This may be connected to Axel Harding, the magician, by the way, who was one of the early lecturers and spoke sometimes on cold, did some stuff with artists, stuff. Has ties to, I think, Nicholas Roerich. That's why I got him listed. William Hartman, practical mystic, lecturer, publisher, editor of the Physical Researcher, founder of the Occult Brotherhood. His name was William Hartman, and the Occult Brotherhood came out of Jamaica, New York, by the way. A lot of this, I don't know if you started catching a pattern here, but a lot of this comes out of New York. Later we'll be talking about New Jersey, Vermont, New England, as we move into the Ohio's. And the reason I want to talk about these before we get into Ohio, because in Ohio we got all kinds of craziness going down. We also have, at one time, we had Mac Magic, or E.F. Grant Magic, then Mac, Robert Nelson, what's his other, and about 5 or 6 others that are producing magic. And they come into play at different points in the story, too. James Hillsop was the founder of the American Institute for Scientific Research, one-time professor of the Logics and Ethics of Columbia University. Hillsop is one of those guys that a lot of skeptics like to credit, right?
Mm-hmm.
He's an author and a book writer, but some of his books were straight up occultism and metaphysics, but yet a lot of the skeptics like to create, quote, Tilsop, but they're taking it completely out of context. So you got to watch out for that. I got a call trying to come in on the other line. That's all. I'll call him back later. So my phone will be beeping for a second or two. Give us a second here, and we'll get rid of this and get back to it. But those are just some of the publishers. DeWitt Lucas is a graphologist.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Knowing People is one of his big publications. He came out of Detroit, Michigan. Sir Charles Lehman, Lyman. I don't know if he's any relation to the Lehman family that bears the name Charles Godfrey Leland. But Lehman does appear in some of those works that were written later that talk about Godfrey's work traveling through the Gypsy lands and so forth. Ledbetter, you know? The infamous occultist Ledbetter? Yeah, he was born on February 17th, 1847. He was a seer occultist, author, theological worker, lecturer, presiding bishop of the Liberal Catholic Church in Melbourne, Australia.
Oh.
Did you catch that? Ledbetter the occultist is actually working as a bishop for the Liberal Catholic Church in Melbourne, Australia. What that means essentially is the works of Ledbetter are anti-occultist propaganda. Get you down the wrong path so you get back to the church. All right.
Oh, boy. And what a proper name for a guy, Bedwetter.
Yeah, but, you know, Ledbetter gets mentioned in a lot of the early mentalist literature too, right?
Yeah.
But this is my point. Hang on one second, okay? Talk for a minute.
Okay.
No, it's gone. Okay, I was gone.
Oh, okay.
Here's some. Not really important. But, I mean, there's a bunch of names on this list. And this is just the publishers, right? Most of these guys are the ones that published a lot of the work. I mean, a lot of publishing, man. I mean, look, Quimby, Pankhurst Quimby, born 1802, died 1866, spiritual healer of Portland, Maine, who taught Mrs. Mary Morris, Baker, Grover, Patterson, and Eddy the art of spiritual healing, who was also the son of George A. Quimby, which I think I mentioned earlier. Did you not get that? Because I mentioned Baker, Patterson, Clover, Eddy. Yeah.
All those. Yep. Started. Those
were all taught by this Quimby chick. Christian Science and spiritual healing, portion of Christian Science, comes from Quimby. It doesn't come from Eddy. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Oh, it's going to get wilder as we go on. But I want to give you some background on some of this stuff. Now, here's one I saw that I really found fascinating. Let me tell you what he does first, because I don't know if there's any connection, okay? But this is an interesting one. It's Arthur Stanley Riggs. He was a director and editor of Art and Archaeology magazine, the Octagon Annex in Washington, D.C. And I've never found anything on him except I've read Art and Archaeology, obviously, but other than that, I don't know if there's any connection to our other Riggs. But it's just an interesting, you see some interesting connections to a lot of this stuff, that there may be something there, there may not be. I don't think there's anything to this Riggs family, particularly because I know the other Riggs family came out of Kentucky and Tennessee. Dr. George Winslow Plummer was a writer and philosopher, teacher, esoteric authority, comes out of New York. A.E. Powell. Now, this cat's interesting. I've been tracking this dude a while, man. A.E. Powell is theological. He sets up the Theological Society of India in England. Okay? This Powell, I think, is actually related to the Powell that set up the Smithsonian, or the Bureau of Ethnology.
Mm-hmm.
Who gets back into another program I mentioned a while back. I think it's all connected. I really do. I mean, I'm not basing that off of like just nothing. I really do. I think it's definitely there's a connection there. It's just some of the stuff you can't exactly prove without other research documents. Nicholas Roerich, we mentioned him in some of the early audio programs. Was a mystic painter. Roerich inspired the foundations of the Art Museum in the name of, ready for this? Okay, let me read this whole thing to you. A Russian painter, occultist. Now, he's one of the founders of the infamous Chintamani stone. Became a world-renowned artist. The Roerich Museum opened March 24th, 1924 at 310 Riverside Drive in New York City. Now, you can still go to the Roerich Museum. It's inside the Roerich building. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Roerich inspired the foundation of the Art Museum in the name of Madame Helena Blavatsky at Avatar, India.
Oh.
His first contribution, yeah. A lot of you have no idea what we're talking about, but it's interesting. His first composition was a painting called The Messenger, which was finished in Silkheim. Roerich's the guy that went to Tibet and brings back the Chintamani stone. That gets all the Freemasons excited, and a lot of the congressmen and senators back in the day all worked up. And then in the Grand Lodge of the 33rd, they have two statues on the table in the library. One of them is Albert Pike. The other one is Nicholas Roerich. Nicholas Roerich wasn't a Mason. But he was given the honorary 33rd degree. But he was actually featured on the library. And actually, particularly of note, he's featured on the library in front of the collection of books by Manly P. Hall.
Uh-huh.
Which a lot of guys like to talk about. Actually, Craig Browning worked with Manly Hall during his elder years, helping do some of his lectures.
Yeah, I do remember you telling me that. Yeah.
But Manly P. Hall was actually kind of a brilliant cat. I mean, he did really. Now he wasn't, he was not a Mason. He was given the honorary 33rd degree. Because that degree can actually be bestowed upon non-Masons.
Mm-hmm.
Rudolf Steiner. Remember Rudolf Steiner from history class?
Yeah.
Yeah, he was Dr. Rudolf Steiner, actually, author, lecturer, Christian mystic, and founder of the Anthroposophical Society in 1913. Hang on, go ahead and talk for a second.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, the thing is, I really like Manly P. Hall because I actually have one of his original books, and very interesting, so I definitely...
Yeah, I'm back.
Okay.
Live, you get interruptions. Yeah, but Rudolf Steiner, I mean, this guy is listed as a Christian mystic. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
Not what they were preaching, baby. That's what I'm saying. So, I mean, are you getting the point that a lot of this stuff, Tweedale, Reverend Charles Tweedale, out of Ricardo Weston, you'll see him pop up. I'm just in the publisher section. I'm not even in the who's who, the scumbags yet. We're in the people that are publishing the work. You get this?
Mm-hmm.
Let me give you some of the W's too. It's just that we're somewhat thorough. Oh, yeah. This guy, William R. Woodfin, Okay. William R. Woodfin, D.D., doctorate degree, was president of the College of Divine Metaphysics located at 4226 Olive Street in St. Louis, Missouri. You'll find out why that might be important later. Because one of your early mentalists actually went to that college. Odd. Nah, not important for this. I'm looking through this. Charles Lane? No, we don't need Charles Lane. Well, let's talk about some books that were related to this whole cataloging thing, okay? So we know about Alice Bailey and the Lucifer Society, or the Lucis Trust, which is what it became later. Reads a lot of books on topics like A Treatise for Cosmic Fire, Initiation, Human and Solar, Letters on Occult Meditation, The Consciousness of Adam, etc., etc., etc. E.H. Bailey writes Paternal Epoch. Wilson Gill Bailey, no, not dead, they live. That was an early spiritual book that was actually connected to Alice Bailey, by the way. One of her relatives. Here's a couple more of those connections, right? James Mark Baldwin, Development and Evolution. Samari S. Baldwin, The Secrets of the Matahama, Land Explained. That was one of your early essays on Indian mystics. About a 300-page book of boring shit. God damn. But Mahama comes back into play because of the letters of Helena Petrovsky to AP Summit, which were published by Trevor Baker. Actually, which is kind of interesting. And then we just got tons of these cats. You know what I'm saying? Tons. Annie Besant, B-E-S-A-N-T, Study of Consciousness, Study of Karma, Ancient Ideas of Modern Life. A lot of the topics that we have in the New Age movement today come from Annie Besant. Nobody talks about her. Changing the World, Death and After, Dharma, or the Meaning of Right and Wrong. These are the book titles. Evolution of Occultism, The Four Great Religions, The Future of Indian Politics. She goes into that. She goes into Hindu studies. Written probably about 70 books that are actually listed. The Riddle of Life and How Theosophy Answers It. So Besant was a big proponent of theosophy and did the same thing that Blavatsky and Bennett did, which Blavatsky was actually Alcott did. But the point is there's so much vast information, right? Adam Beck wrote a book called The Key of Dreams, which is one of the early books on dream interpretation before Jung or Freud. He also wrote The Perfume of the Rainbow, which is a I'm going to call it pseudo-spiritualist book, and The Ninth Vibration. Now, one of the really tough ones to find is a book by Professor Paul Benjere, B-J-E-R-R-E. It's called The History and the Practice of Psychoanalysis. Okay? I've never been able to track down a copy. One of our early hypnotists was Frederick Bajashorn. He wrote a book actually called Hypnotism. That's B-J-O-R-N-S-T-R-O-M for those of you that are into the hypnotist thing. Go back and find some of your roots in that. We're not going to get into Blavatsky, although she wrote about as much as about anybody. This is actually kind of a cool one. I actually saw a copy of this when I was in the store for something terribly long, and I read kind of fast. Gertrude A. Bradford, yes, related to the Bradford family of the colonial environments, right? writes a book called The Subconscious Mind, How to Reach and Arouse. Kind of an interesting title. But it was one of the early works on subconscious mind after Jung, but written before 1925. Interesting, eh? Mm-hmm. Mary Bly Bond. Some of you may have heard that name before, Mary Bly Bond. Atlantis, the story of the most. She was one of the early proponents of Atlantis studies in the 1800s with Blavatsky. Okay? You might be more familiar with her husband, Frederick Bly Bond, or maybe brother, who the hell knows. Tell they could be inbred. The Company of Avalon, where he's talking about stuff related to the Arthurian legends and the Gates of Remembrance, which is pure spiritualism. William Bryant, MD, What is Spiritualism? What spiritualism really is, and the truth about spiritualism. He was one of the early, how do we say this? How do I say that politely? Because he gets into anti-spiritualism.
Oh.
Anyway, he was a Mormon. Just call it out. Hayward Carrington's books. Here's a couple of his non-mentalist books. Some of these are not listed on the Wikipedia entries. Death, Its Causes and Phenomena, Death Defended, 1912. Dystopia and Paldania and Her Phenomena, 1909. He wrote Handcuff Tricks, Hindu Magic. Those are two of the magic books. Higher Physical Development, Modern Physical Phenomena, Personal Experiences on Spiritualism in 1913. Physical Phenomena on Spiritualism. Did I mention he wrote a book on handcuff tricks? Did y'all catch this shit? You got scammed, people. I'm pointing it out. Sideshow and Animal Tricks. Yeah, did I mention book? He put a book on that too. Yeah. And his next book was Spiritualism and Psychology. Spiritualism, a Fact and a Fake, 1925. See, in 1909, it's real. Then he writes a book on handcuff tricks after Houdini, Hindu Magic, and then he puts out Higher Physical Development, Higher Psychophysical Development, which is a yogi philosophy, Modern Physical Phenomena, Spiritual Experiences on Spiritualism, 1913, and then he's into, by 1925, he's into Spiritualism, a Fact and a Fake. And then he writes a book called The Boys Book for Music, The Problems, and then he starts turning against physical research. But in 1908, he's writing The Coming Science, which he's talking about physical research. Then he's denouncing physical research because Houdini got popular, okay? Mm-hmm. But in 1907, he writes The Physical Phenomena of Spiritualism. And somewhere between 1907 and 1915, he writes Your Psychic Powers and How to Develop Them. You know what we call that today? Pitch book.
Pitch book.
Unbelievable, dude. Edward Cloud writes The Question. R.S. Clymer writes The Rosicrucians, kind of a little expose on them. Carpenter writes Mesmerism, Spiritualism. This is W.B. Carpenter, by the way. Hayward Carrington is just off the hook. And a lot of those guys that I just mentioned towards the end there, also Carrington cites some of those. Some of those get cited by Carrington. It's all the same, okay? So at one point with Hayward Carrington, you have guys promoting the agenda, and then the next moment he's not promoting the agenda. He's trying to make some money writing a book, right? Because mentalism is a commercial mercenary. It functions for profit. That's what Nelson was talking about in 44. You know what I'm saying? That's just wishy-washy stuff. You know what I mean?
Oh, boy. Yeah.
Well, that's exactly what he's referring to. I mean, but it wasn't just him. There was a whole list of these cats. Corson, Connor, Sylvie, Courtney, Cox, William DeMar wrote Ghostology. That's a great title, by the way. Ghostology. William DeMar, Denmar, D-A-N-M-A-R, for you guys that want to look at that, is writing one of the early books on ghosts. His next book was Modern Nirvanaism. Now, how you go from a book on ghosts to Nirvana, I have no idea, but hey, guess what? There it is. That's what happened. That's what they did. Reuben B. Davenport, this is Davenport Magic Connections, The Death Blow to Spiritualism. He was one of the anti-spiritualists. Actually wrote a fairly decent work. Dr. Charles Maurice Davis was a London mystic, or Mystic London. He wrote an entire book on just London mysticism that was going down. And in that book, he's also given you a lot of names and places for a lot of the guys that were doing the mystic routines in London, England. Okay? See, the problem is, when you look into the history of this kind of thing, right, it's not just one single avenue. It comes out of physical research. It comes out of spiritualism. It comes out of the Mormons. It comes out of Cotton Mather, from the Pilgrims. It's all traced. All this stuff I'm giving you now before 1925, because it was cataloged fairly well, relates back to the early foundations of what would become modern mentalism, right? There's literally thousands and thousands of books. I'm just touching a few of them, okay? Prior to spiritualism, shortly prior to spiritualism, there's a guy named Andrew Jackson Davis. Now, this is not to be confused with the Andrew Jackson Davis, the president of the Confederacy. This is a spiritualist that appears.
Well, I was going to say.
Yeah, appears shortly before the Fox sisters. He writes books like The Nature of Divine Revelation, The Great Harmonia, which is one of the big books, on what later would become spiritualism, The Magic Staff, which was his autobiography. The Principles of Nature is one of the big books that actually gives rise to spiritualism, or at least the healing function of spiritualism, because in it, he's actually channeling ghosts and spirit entities to diagnose medical conditions. Yeah.
Oh, boy.
Oh, yeah, it's all tied together, man. There's no see, this is what I'm talking about. There is no separation. There is no separation between all this and all that, okay? L. D. Lawrence. Now, D. Lawrence, we know, wrote books on magic, right? The infamous D. Lawrence. But a couple of his non-magic books are called The Book of Death and The Master Key. Those are literature, more based in spiritism than actually spiritualism. But D. Lawrence plays a big, D. Lawrence, right? Blindfold Act, a lot of the early seeing billet work and stuff. D. Lawrence. Direct connection and proof that he wrote other books besides the stuff that is normally associated to magic and mentalism. He published a few effects back in the early days, sold a few Davenports. I love this shit, man. Let me give you some other. William Fielding, right? Fielding turns up the annals of mentalism, actually. But do you know what he turns up for?
No.
Autosuggestion and psychoanalysis and autosuggestion. Fielding was the early proponents of that. The first book was The Sanity of Sex. The second one was Health and Self-Mastery Through Psychoanalysis and Autosuggestion. And this book, by the way, is one that probably Napoleon Hill read when he wrote his big farce, was it Think and Grow Rich? Yeah. Where he talks to a bunch of guys and never does any research, or never really talked to them. Yeah. John Fisk wrote one book that was pretty much related to spiritual, although John Fisk is primarily known as an American historian. I have 5 or 6 of his books on the shelf with some of them signed from the 1800s, Through the Nature of God. Now, the problem with John Fisk and historical works is John Fisk does push a little of the Christian agenda on the side of recounting the tales of the American West and so forth. Yeah, it gets a little strange. But you have the Elliot's play into this. Angels Seen Today. Elliot's one of the Gordon Hallam Elliot and Irene Hallam Elliot, his wife. One of the big proponents of Angels Seen Today and Conversations with the Angels, and also co-author of Angels Seen Today. In metaphysics, you have a bunch of that angel stuff. You know, where they all talk about angels and stuff. A lot of the roots of that come out of Elliot's work, for those of you paying attention. For those of you who are not, I don't care. Professor Fowler, The Manual of Mental Sciences for Teachers and Students. Love that title. The Manual of Mental Sciences for Teachers and Students. Okay? The Science of the Life, this is O.S. Fowler. The Science of Life, Manhood, and Womanhood, Love, Laws, and Powers, and Human Sciences for Geology. Yeah. Both of those guys, and Charles H. Fowler, Common Sense, The Philosophy of Spirit, of Psychology. Both of those guys, both of the Fowlers would give way to founding of phrenology, but were writing books for your school children in about 1860. Yeah. I love the proof. Let's see, where's this other guy at? I'm trying to find a couple more, and then we'll go into some other things, because this is a long, long, bloody list. Garden, Lee Garden, F. Lee, L-E-I-G-H, Gardner, writes a seminal work called The Catalog Raisonné of Works on Occult Sciences. And he's going to give you a bunch, in that book, he covers a lot of physical research data. Okay? In about 600 pages, I think. It was extremely boring. But what I'm pointing out here is, Haddock, Frank Channing Haddock was a really cool one, too. He writes books like Business Power, The Culture of Courage, Creative Personality, The Power of Will, and Practical Psychology. Now, all these books were published at the time around 1910, when America was trying to convert everybody to a commercialism status.
Uh-huh.
You know, to go from the agrarian society to the mass market commercializing society to fuel the Industrial Revolution. That's where Haddock comes in. Haddock's books are basically propaganda for that. You know, mind power, be the best you can be, all that bullshit. Yeah, ridiculous.
Of course.
Robert Hare, this is going to go back to 1856. You'll hear Hare mentioned a few times in the Houdini investigations and stuff. Right?
Mm-hmm.
He wrote a book called Experimental Investigations into Spirit Manifestations in 1856. Now, in this period, when you get to the 1850s, what you're going to find is there's really expensive, for one, but they're also talking about the birth of spiritualism in 1848. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
They're also going to name a lot of people that come out of Palmyra, New York, which is why I'm mentioning it now, because we're going to cover some of that crap. I hear in a minute. Daniel Douglas Home, Incidents of My Life, 2 volumes. Madame Douglas Home, The Gift of D.D. Home, you know, the guy that floated, was written in 1890. The interesting thing I'm pointing out here is Madame Douglas Home is basically his wife writing The Gift of D.D. Home, and D.D. Home, his life and missions. Most of the information that we get about Home, or Hume, H-O-M-E, comes from his wife. It doesn't actually come from him. I wonder how much of that is propaganda. And in 24, well, the reason I went to 1925 as a cutoff is because in 1924, Houdini releases A Magician Among the Spirits, okay? After that book comes out, a lot of these earlier books don't get mentioned again. I wonder what that is. Well, that's because that's where the cover-up starts. Or the early whitewashing of the whole goddamn thing. And then, Al Baker Gang comes into play after that book's published. Everybody's trying to gain notoriety. But when you look at works like Professor William James, this is William James, the philosopher type, Human Immortality, the one that gave birth to Alcoholics Anonymous, basically. As both Dr. Bob and Bill Wilson were both reading his works. A variety of religious experience was his big work. The Principles of Psychology in 1890 and so forth. But a lot of his stuff wasn't necessarily pseudo-spiritual, but it was based on spiritual principles through direct psychology. He was a little bit better. You had Hargrove Jennings writes a lot of stuff on the Rosicrucians. Huxley, James Halsop, The Borderland of Physical Research is probably the best book he's known for, although Physical Research and Survival in 1913. All these guys get whitewashed after 1924, okay? When Houdini's book takes off. You get what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
And then there's works by Christian May on this list and others. Brad Ledbetter's works, published a few things. I'm just trying to give you some of the highlights because this thing can take off and go wild. James Oppenheim, Your Hidden Power. That's related to, that Oppenheim is actually related to the Oppenheim that develops the nuclear bomb. So, but you should be started. Dr. Carl Eugene Newman, right? Related to Newman, the mentalist. Okay. This is the German Newman. This is, I think, grandfather or something that's writing a lot of this, or grandfather or cousin or something that's writing a lot of stuff, which is in German, which I'm not even going to try to translate, but it's basically. Some of it's on Buddhism. A lot of it looks like it's on Buddhism. Henry Alcott Steele, A Historical Retrospective. Old Diary Leaves. People from the Other World. Okay, People from the Other World. There it is. That is the one that gets into the Ascended Masters and the spiritual stuff in 1875. This is shortly before the Theosophical Society. Yeah. Yeah, I wonder where they all steal from. And I'm only actually covering, at this point, I'm only covering a period from about 1870 to 1923. Which is where most guys will stop, right? But I mean, they might go back to the Fox sisters, but they won't dive past that, right? So I want to start with some of the modern stuff, and then we'll move back into the more sketchy stuff, right? Frank Podmore. Podmore freaking did magic tricks, okay? You might remember reading about him in the early episodes of The Linking Ring. But he's actually more known for, and this would be about 1920s, some of the guys will call him Frank Podmore in The Linking Ring. But he's more known for writing Apparitions and Thought Transference, 1894. That is a early book on spirit communication and messages from the spirit world, the history of thought and spiritualism, phantasms of the living, studies in physical research, 1897, published in London, the naturalization of the supernatural in 1908. LST Powell. He's another one connected to freaking Smithsonian. Psychic research in the New Testament. Unbelievable. It's just unbelievable, man. Seville, B.W. Seville. Seville is connected to the Broadway entertainer, the vaudevillian entertainer family Seville, and writes a book called Apparitions, which basically deals with spiritualist matters in 1874. Sir Walter Scott's Letters on Demonology and Witchcraft, published in 1898. F.W. Sears. Sears is tied into the family of Sears Tower, along with Clara Sears. Clara Sears writes gleanings from the unpublished Shaker journals. Yeah, Shaker Spiritualism, right there. But these are people tied to the Sears Tower in Chicago. How to Conquer Fear. And her husband writes How to Conquer Fear, how to give treatments. He's talking about physical treatments, psychic treatments. It's kind of Sears Psychology Lessons 1, 2, and 3, and then further Sears lessons. Saffrill. One of your cold writers, I'm not going to get into him because he'll pop up again. Edmund Shaftesbury. Now, this was an interesting cat because Edmund Shaftesbury, really early work on advanced magnetism. Magnetism in this case is like mesmerism and mental magnetism. The operations of the mind, personal magnetism. This is all has to do with operations of the mind. Writes on second magnetism. Magnetism in this case is drawing things towards you, right? Mm-hmm. You've heard of the book The Secret or whatever that piece of crap was? Mm-hmm. A lot of it comes from Shaftesbury. Oh. It literally leads to regurgitation of a lot of stuff that's in Shaftesbury's work. Uh-huh. Tanner, Studies in Spiritualism, written in 1910. Rudolf Steiner, Atlantis and Lemuria, which is, by the way, a really good book. Actually, a copy of the book published by Health Research. Reprint. But Rudolf Steiner writes, The Gates of Knowledge and Cult Investigations, 7 Occult Seals in the Columns, The Way of Intuition, 3 essays on Haeckel and Karma, Haeckel, which is a form of almost forgotten form of karmatic studies. You can go back and read that and pull that stuff back up and probably run that as a good lecture too, because nobody's heard about it in 100 years. You know what I'm saying? Franklin A. Thomas writes How to Develop Psychic Powers, How to Hold Circles and Developing Mediumships at Home, Philosophy and Phenomena of Spiritualism, and The Soul Science and the Proof of Life After Death. But Franklin Thomas's work is on how to develop psychic powers, and this is going to be probably 1910 or so, 1920s. A lot of the early mentalists would have read Franklin Thomas's work because it deals with the idea of how to actually develop real psychic powers, and they're going to use this as part of their stage personas. Get you some of that. Wow. Thomas Olden Todd, Ullman, that's Thomas Ullman, Olmantodd, Todd, writes a book called Hydesville. There's no publishing date on it. It's another document of the Fox sisters, probably a little bit more accurate than the other ones wrote, for you researchers out there. You also got Swedenborg in this list. Emanuel Swedenborg. We're not going to even get into Swedenborg. Swedenborg is basically your foundations for a lot of the modern New Age movement, by the way, and a lot of the ideas and thoughts that came into play. Let me put it that way. Edward White Rider White tarot deck. Yeah.
Oh boy.
This is the guy. This is the guy who writes a new encyclopedia of Freemasonry, Devil Worship in France, emblematic Freemasonry. Yeah, White was a Freemason. Okay. They also have Rider White, one of the guys that's principal behind most of the tarot deck.
Yeah.
Lives of the Alchemical Philosophers, 1888. Studies in Mysticism, 1906. The Book of the Holy Grail, The Brotherhood of the Rosary Cross, The Hidden Church of the Holy Grail, The Life of Louis Claude de Saint Martin, The Occult Sciences. You get a picture here? It's not what you were told, man. H.T. White, which is, I believe, his brother, is a compendium of natal astrology. But we see this all the time, though. We keep seeing, what we're seeing here is we're seeing a crossover of very interesting cats, actually. A lot of these would become the foundations. George Wilde, Chilean astrology. George Wilde was one of the big astrologers of the time. Wilde, W-I-L-D-E, by the way, was one of the guys that Robert Nelson would quote from some of his early, to develop some of his early astrological works, along with George Llewellyn, as well as Zadkiel, which writes the Grammar of Astrology, the Guide to Astrology, and Lily's Astrology, which were fairly well-known works that guys like Robert Nelson, who also did some astrology stuff and creates this horoscope pitch, comes out of these guys.
Huh.
So you get any questions so far? Or am I being pretty clear?
Nope, you're pretty clear.
Okay, I want to make sure I'm clear. Let me give you a few early publication titles that you may want to. These are periodicals. Advanced Thought Magazine, The Astrological, The Student of Depth, The American Druggist Journal, The California Spiritualist. These are early publications that were mentioned by some of these guys that I just talked about. The Comfort of the Conqueror, The Davidic Age, The Divine Life, The Equilibrist, The Esoterist, which is published in Washington, D.C., by the way, by Agnes D. Marsland. The Harmonizer. Yes, I know, I used that title. Sorry. Which is actually the title. The Harmonizer is an effect that changes water, but the original comes out of an early work published in Oakland, California, called The Magazine of the Spiritual, Auto-Suggestion, specializing in the ideal methods of affirmative education. Affirmations by Dr. George L. Perrin. Yeah, get you some of that. Yeah. Yeah, tell me again, I don't know what the fuck I'm talking about. Yeah, fuck you. Asshole.
Wow.
That was a pretty good comment to somebody I had to deal with recently. Thank you very much. The Mystic Triangle, The Novelist, The New Thought Bulletin. The New Thought Bulletin, by the way, was a publication of the International New Thought Alliance. This is the monthly bulletin of the New Thought movement. Okay? Basically just an overview of genetics, whatever. Or eugenics, I should say. The Occult Digest. A lot of these things I'm giving you are really, really freaking rare. The Psychic World. The Psychic World's a great one. You still see copies pop up every now and then on like eBay, but it'll be single issues. It was Philadelphia's only spiritualist paper. So some of you guys are working the Philadelphia markets might want to try to look up and see if you can find some of those, because that will give you a really good context when working in Philadelphia area. If like you're doing a ghost show or seance or something, because you're going to have early stories of spiritualism in Philadelphia. Okay? So-and-so contacted a ghost at this place 120 years ago. We're going to try to do it again. There's a show concept, right? And you can pretty much take it from that. In Los Angeles, actually 261 South Los Angeles Street in Los Angeles, California. There was a book published called, periodical published called Psycho Numero, which was a household perfectness numerology piece. It was actually quite interesting. If somebody would pop up a copy of that, I'd like to see it. It's just fairly rare. But let's not forget Scientific America published stuff on spiritualism and physical research. The Temple Artisan, which is by Melanie out of Helicon, California. I believe I pronounced that right. The Temple Artisan, which is theosophy, occultism, and mysticism. And a lot of these publications I'm mentioning now, like that one, could have been very easily read by some of the early mentalists, like Alexander, as they turned up in some of the Nelson collection before it was sold off, according to the auction records, or according to certain people that were, privy to the information. Because, Robert Nelson bought Alexander's collection, and some of those books were found in that particular collection. Interesting footnote there. And then you have stuff like the Church of the New Age magazine out of Manchester, England, or the Herald of the Star, which is it's described as the international organ of the Order of the Star of the East, which was basically a spiritualist, almost a spiritualist viewpoint without actually a lot of the spiritual stuff, but it got into social, educational, religious, and humanitarian efforts. The publishing office is 6 Tavistock Square in London. You didn't catch that, did you?
No. Say it again.
It was in Tavistock Square, London. The Journal of the Society for Physical Research was also connected to 31 Tavistock Square, London, a.k.a. the infamous Tavistock Institute, which is nearby. It's one of the branch offices, by the way. Now, for those of you guys that know about the Tavistock Institute and some of their flamboyant shit, you'll have some more info of this.
Okay.
We're going to skip through a lot of this. There's here. Let's throw a couple out for the guys in Mexico. The Azteca, Azteca News, which was published in Mexico, and El Sigo Esperata, which is an early spiritualist piece published in Mexico too. Directed by Enrique Velasquez, actually. Oh, and for our guys in Sweden, Stjärnen, Stjärnen. The sectional organ, the Order of the Star of the East, is a bi-monthly. This is published in Stockholm prior to 1925. In the United States, and I'll go into some other things here because I know some of this is kind of interesting but boring at the same time, but it has to be covered, okay? These are psychologists, astrologers, character analysts, graphologists, numerologists, palmists, psychologists, and vocational counselors. This is how they were described in 1925. I'm going to give you just a couple of the more prominent ones as I see them, as I get through this list. Like Alice Ayers, which is out of California. Margaret H. Barton, Barton, who works exclusively out of Hollywood, by the way. She was one of the big numerologists. A lot of the early silent films, by the way, would contact her to Well, actually, her and Sidney Kimball Barnett, who was also an astrologer, to figure out what date they should release the film on. Just to let you know. Let's get some gossip. Oh, yeah. Ms. Ida Lewis Bentley was a graphologist, handwriting expert out of Miami, which is kind of interesting.
Uh-huh.
These are the ones that were actually living in around 1925, okay? Dr. Juno Bell Walton was another famous numerologist out of Venice, California, Venice Beach area. I mean, there's a long list, man. Illinois, who do we got? Oh, Sam, yeah. Swami Brahmayada, who ran out of the Masonic Temple. Why is a Swami running out of the Masonic Temple? Good question. Probably because he's not from India. Indiana, we have Helen L. Durham, which does turn up. I've actually seen some business cards from her. As you know, we're in Ohio. So a lot of the stuff in Ohio and Indiana ends up in opposite states. Arthur Robin was an early character reader. That's an interesting one. The term character reader was an early term for what would later become psychic reader. Arthur P. Robin, character reader. I mean, you know what can I say there? And there's other connections. So there's connections in New Jersey, Michigan. Lucas B. DeWitt was actually a graphologist. His name appears in a couple of the early magic programs. Dana Abbott, I mentioned earlier, is out of New York. Pennsylvania, we have William Boyd, who was actually a numerologist. Coswell was also a numerologist. Sellers, Wilson. Then goes to the Temple of Sciences. You know, it was all numerology. A lot of numerology came out of Pennsylvania for some reason. In Ohio, we have... Now, Ohio is interesting. Ohio, we have a nice mix, right? We have a mix between phrenologists. One of the guys that was trained by L.S. Fowler, not L.S. Fowler, but L.S. Fowler was a guy named William Donaldson, was a phrenologist working out of Euchreville. I think it's up towards you. Ohio. Miss Bars worked out of Cambridge, Ohio as an astrologer. Professor Christian was an astrologer out of Toledo, along with J.C. Clutterbuck, which I mentioned earlier. We're all in Ohio. But some I'm noting for myself for later, so let's get back to this. West Virginia, you had John Edward Ambrose, who was a great term, by the way, seer, S-E-E-R, seer, a.k.a. psychic, right?
Uh-huh.
Now, the reason seer is important is, we'll cover that a little later, because that's what the early psychics were actually called, seers. A lot of the mentalists call themselves seers, too, which actually comes out of treasure digging, which gives rise to Mormonism. And then you got things known as magnetic healers, metaphysical practitioners, etc. I mean, the list is freaking long. Are you getting this? Long.
Yeah, it's
and this is 1925, because this was actually one of the best documented accounts. However, if you can find a copy of this book, it's going to run you about $800. Reference material ain't cheap, man. Education ain't cheap either. Pay up.
Yeah.
Oh, here's where did I just see that? Yeah, there it is. I'm going to make a note for myself. Reverend James H. Pateman, lecturer, teacher, author, and healer, pastor of the New Thought Temple in Cincinnati at 4114 Forest Avenue. Back in about 85, there's a Pateman, a lady named Pateman, that was working in the Dayton, Ohio area. Not a very good psychic, actually, but whatever. That was a little pain in the ass, actually. But she's connected to this from James H. Patton. Directly. Probably the only true statement she ever made. Lyda Disher worked as a healer in Dayton, Ohio. Wheatstone worked in Oak Ranch. Alice Wildman, W-I-D-M-A-N, worked actually on Main Street, which is interesting. In 1121 North Main Street, for years there was a little reader's den up there. You know what I'm saying? Not too far away from this reader's den, actually. So I guess to show that, you know, some of these readers' parlors exist on these streets for decades. You call, I'm not going to cover the phone because I don't care. Colorado. Is there anything of significance? No, not really. Connecticut, Miss Heaton Barnes, was a medium out of working out of Connecticut. I love having the correct records, man. It's so nice. See, because this is the who's who. I can look up and see if these people are real or if they're feeding me a bunch of crap, right? Like a lot of the stuff that came out of Randy's mouth doesn't jive. Massachusetts, well, let me just go off of Massachusetts for a second, please. Massachusetts has probably, I don't know, 200-300 reverends and spiritualist reverends and psychics listed, like Reverend Nellie E. Abbott, Fanny Allerton, Alan Brown, Baker, Barlett. Willard Barlett, yeah, there's one. Bob. He'll probably been back in the thing. Mrs. Blanche Blankenship, medium, Brockton. Yeah, Blankenship. Mm-hmm. Why would that be at all? Oh, Grandma Treasure. For those of you who are following, Fred Dixon was a clairvoyant medium. Ms. Daniels was a medium. A lot of female mediums, lots and lots of female mediums. Knowles, Mrs. M. Knowles was a medium. Boston, Massachusetts, in the whole area of Massachusetts, from like Dorchester, Boston, Harversville, Roxby, all that area, it's packed with mediums, man. Right? Although spiritualism burst up out of Hydesville, New York, which is really 6 miles away from Palmyra, New York, which is, if you drew a straight line, you know, from the Hill of Palmyra to the Hydesville house, you're like 6-7 miles. That's pretty sad. Lilydale, New York's got a bunch. Actually, let me mention some of these guys, because a lot of these guys didn't get published in the Lilydale history. Reverend Frederick Birch did. Charles A. Burgess did. Franklin Casbeer, C-A-S-B-E-R, did not. Miss Floy, F-L-O-Y, is it Cottrell? C-O-T-T-R-E-L. Was one of the obscure ones. Pierre Keeler, K-E-L-E-R. Reverend Lane does get mentioned quite a bit. Elmer Reynolds does get mentioned, and Ridley does get mentioned, but a couple of those do not in the Lilydale histories. In Ohio, interesting note, we are packed with spiritualists, by the way, in 1925. Bissett, Bramall, Becklin, Brickman, Burroughs, Casey, Kukol, Dryden, Feynman, Higby, it's a strange name, L-O-T-T-I-G, I'm going to try to pronounce it, Matthews, Norman, Pendulum Steele. Yeah, Lulu Steele was a relative of Alcott Steele, that Steele section of the family. Wadsworth, Williams, Brookhaven, Miss Lucy Wright, which is actually up your way, Cleveland, Ohio, spiritual healer.
Mm-hmm.
No, we're doing Pennsylvania, Rhode Island. I mean, literally hundreds and hundreds. Every state had a bunch of them. Wisconsin didn't have too many listed, only two, which was Francis Hood and Kalboshoff. I believe I pronounced that name right. So, at the time of the 1920s, or in 1925, when Houdini's writing his book on revealing all these mediums, these are all the real mediums, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Like Pennsylvania and Philadelphia. Philadelphia alone had about 60. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Spiritualists, reverends, ministers, he's a medium, spiritual advisor, consultants, more spiritual healers, spiritual readings, spiritual advisor, trance medium. Jose Santos was a trance medium. Lucy Booth, Reverend Lucy Booth Morgan was a medium. Lucy Booth, by the way, for the Booth side, the Booth element of her family, related to John and Wilkes Booth.
Oh, wow.
I'm not even making this shit up, dude. It's so fucking bizarre. It's not even funny. But what we see is an overabundance of real mediums, and then we also see an overabundance of some of the more prominent mediums that wrote, with references to books and periodicals, like, Miss Bailey, Allison Bailey, the Bank Sisters. You ever heard of the Bank Sisters?
Oh, yeah.
Not the porno ones, the other ones. They were the ones that did the spirit portraits. Life after death and so forth. They did a lot of spirit portraiture. Fairly well known, and a lot of the ideas of spirit paintings and so forth come out of the Bank Sisters, right? The Davenport brothers, Ira and William, and Sister Elizabeth. Okay, this is the Davenports, right? The magician family, before they were exposed, described themselves as physical mediums commencing in 1846. Thank you very much. The Yeti brothers were materialistic mediums. They did, how do you put that? They were listed in, the Yeti brothers were listed in, Harry S. Olcott's work on light that was published in London in March 24th, 1925. And they were also listed by friends of Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, which does appear prominently quite a bit. Doyle believed in mediums and spiritualism. He even wrote a book on spiritualism. Doyle also got into it with Houdini about spiritualism. It's an interesting story there, too. And Steiner, Smith. I mean, it just goes on and on and on, dude. A lot of these... Actually, let's see if I can find that. I want to give you some big one, man. I just want to give you one. Let's see. I might not be able to find it. There was a Maine senator that was real heavy into spiritualism. Yeah, Maine senator inside of his own church. Okay, so I'm going to put this down for a minute. But you get the idea. We're talking about a vast number of people, and we got multiple stories going on at the same time, yes?
Right.
Okay. Let me pull up my notes. Now, if we go all the way back, okay, I mean, we go back even further. We can go back to a guy named John Cleve Sims, which Sims is interesting because he's the one that did the Sim purchase. One of his cousins, Sims purchase is also known as the Miami purchase, was okay, let me explain it. Let me see if I can explain some of this and how it works. A lot of the history that you've been taught is bullshit, okay? Or they give you little lies in there, okay? Now, Sims did the Sims purchase and purchased an area around Miami County here in Dayton. Part of Dayton was actually purchased by Sims. Okay, and they touted on Wikipedia as 300,000 acres, 330,000 acres, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, in the Sims purchase, President George Washington signed the patent on October 30th, 1794, conveying Sims 248,250 acres, plus a survey township of 23,040 acres, okay, in the trust for the Academy. This land was become known as Sim purchase. In the Wikipedia article, they cite 330,000 acres. Well, that's not true. Okay, it's actually about 275,000 acres. Okay, so they've over-exaggerated about 50 acres. And the reason they did that is they include Hamilton, Butler, and Warren counties. Okay, which would make sense. Okay, but it's not correct because they're basing their Hamilton, Warren size of this number, this 330,000 numbers, off the current document of Hamilton, Butler, and Warren County, okay, which are 330,000 acres. But at the time of Judge John Cleve Sims of New Jersey, who was also a member of the Continental Congress, he didn't purchase that much. Got it?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yep.
Now, Sims, let me go back to that, marries Annie Tuthill in 1741 to 1706 when she was born in Matlock, New York. Annie Tuthill Sims was born at her father's estate, okay? Now, Annie Tuthill Sims later became Annie Tuthill Harrison, which is the wife of President William Henry Harrison and the granddaughter of Benjamin Harrison, okay? Mm-hmm. Was also nominally the First Lady of the United States. Although she never entered the White House for some reason, died at 65. Now, that doesn't seem like anything, right? Why would a judge that purchased some land for Washington be of any importance? Well, it's not because of him necessarily. It's because of a guy named John Cleve Sims Jr., which is also sometimes referred to as Captain Sims or Ensign Sims, who lived November 5th, 1780 to May 28th, 1829, who was an American Army officer, trader, and lecturer. Sims is basically best known for his 1818 theory, a variant theory of the hollow earth. He's actually buried in Hamilton. Oh, fuck, it gets better. Now, this is the variant theory of the hollow earth theory, okay? Out of the hollow earth theory, we get the rise of the foundations of Atlantis, the ascended masters, talked about by Blavatsky. A lot of these things intersect back and forth, okay? Junior was born, John Cleve Sims Jr. was born in Sussex County, New Jersey, to Thomas and Mercy Nieharker Sims. He was named for his uncle, John Cleve Sims, so that's why I mentioned it, okay? Now, the other information on John Cleve, the senior that bought the land, was a member of the Continental Congress and a colonel in the Revolutionary War. He was also Chief Justice of New Jersey, father-in-law. This guy is like the black sheep of the family, right? his uncle is a member of the Continental Congress, colonel in the Revolutionary War, Chief Justice of New Jersey, but yet his little nephew there is, running around the country talking about the Hollow Earth. Kind of a blight on the family, which is also connected to the Harrisons. As in the President Harrison? Yeah, because of Sims. So, what we're going to point out now is something really bizarre and unique, and I absolutely adore it. Writing in 1817 to his stepson, Anthony Lockwood Sims, for the first time stated that, I interfere that all the planets or globes are hollow. This is the birth of the weirdness that would later become mentalism, maybe. Okay? But Sims' theory was far from unprecedented, while the idea of the polar openings leading into, where do you go? Hang on, my page has jumped on me. Yeah, while leading into the polar openings, leading into the Hollow Earth series, Sims' invocation, the concept of the Hollow Earth, the intellectual proceedings dating back to the 17th century, Edmund Halley. That's the astrologer and the guy that Halley's Comet's named for. Yeah, apparently Edmund Halley believed the Earth was hollow too. But in Halley's explanation, different locations of geographic and magnetic poles of the hollow Earth, of the Earth, while Halley found the geometrical data he had gathered to be of interest, he proposal of the hollow Earth was never widely accepted. Well, that's interesting.
Wow.
Right? Some scholars have proposed that Sims may have learned of the hollow Earth, learned of Halley's hollow Earth. Okay. Let me see if I can explain this, because this is going to be absolutely mind-blowing. So we have John Cleese Sims, right? He's running around. His uncle does the Sims purchase, really noted, upstanding guy. But John Cleese Sims Jr. is running around the career country doing lectures on the Earth is hollow, a.k.a. the bullshit, right? As most would contend, okay? But Sims may have learned of Halley's hollow Earth via the Cotton Mather book, The Christian Philosopher. Now, for those of you that do not know who Cotton Mather was, he was the guy at the Salem witchcraft trials, right? He was the big Cotton Mather reverend that blew up the Salem witchcraft trials, that went all hysteria on all the people, hung a bunch of people, and did a bunch of crazy stuff. So what these scholars are saying is that Sims got the idea of the Halley's hollow Earth, or started on this path of the hollow Earth from Edmund Halley, which comes out of Cotton Mather's book, The Christian Philosopher. Now, in 1818, Sims announced his hollow Earth theory to the world, publishing Circular Number 1. You would actually go on to publish a couple of those. And the other one was the Sims theory of the concentric spheres in 1826. Another fellow, Jeremy Reynolds, apparently had an article published as a separate booklet in 1827, Remarks of Sims Theory, which appeared in the American Quarterly Review in 1868. A professor, W.F. Lyons, published The Hollow Globe, which put forth a Sims-like hollow Earth theory as well, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Now, this Cotton Mather guy, right, is a pilgrim minister that blows up the whole Salem, Massachusetts witch trials. Basically, all comes out of Cotton Mather, or part of it comes out of Cotton Mather. He lives from 1663 to 1728. He attends Harvard College, honorary doctorate, 1710 University of Glasgow, and most notably known as a New England Puritan minister, meaning he's a pilgrim, basically. But he was also, this is where it ties back, a prolific pamphleteer, meaning he wrote a lot of pamphlets and books, right? Although he's most remembered for his visitor support of the Salem witch trials, he was subsequently denied the presidency of Harvard College, which his father, Increasant Mather, had held. Okay, let me give you a little background here. His father is president of Harvard College, okay? Cotton Mather was up for the position at Harvard College for presidency to succeed his father, okay? Cotton Mather believed that there was witches running around Salem.
Oh, nice.
Well, no, I mean, he's a distinguished fellow of the University of Glasgow. He gets honorary doctorate in 1710 from Harvard. Or in 1778 Harvard College, and 1681 honorary doctorate, 1710. Just saying, right? He's also FRS, which is I usually see his name for Cotton Mather FRS, which is a Fellowship of the Royal Society, is what that stands for. Is an award granted to individuals of the Royal Society judges to have made a substantial contribution to the improvement of natural sciences, including mathematics, engineering, science, and medical science. It's Cotton Mather, right? He's buried in the original North Church, or he was the original pastor of North Church. Now, North Church here is not the old North Church. Paul Revere's the other one, okay? There's two. There's North Church and Old North Church. Now, where it ties into, it gets kind of convoluted, actually. Theoretical roots of Puritanism in New England had left, Puritans to return to the theological roots of Puritanism, who's left England for New England, the American colonies in North America. Writes a book called The Magnetic Christia Americana, which composes of 7 books, many of which depict a historical narrative. Okay, they're complete crap, by the way, except for the fact that later, according to a modern historian, Slovakian Berkovitch, Mather, was not known for his writing in neutral, unbiased perspective. Okay, which is reasonably true, because Cotton Mather definitely had a biased perspective, right? Let's strike down the devil in America and all that bullshit. But this Sackman, I'm just going to call him Sackman because his last name's unpronounceable. Is according to literary historian, this is on Wikipedia, according to literary historian Sackman Berkovitch. But here's the problem: Sackman Berkovitch isn't actually a literary historian. He's a Canadian literary and cultural critic, not a historian who spent most of his life teaching and writing in the United States. Okay. So again, we got this weird statement running in this thing that he's not known for his books. He's known for his unbiased perspective. Well, in all these early books I mentioned, they all have a biased perspective. See what I'm getting at?
Yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, the 7 books collected in the volumes developed by the Massachusetts, New England. Notable parts of the book include Mather's descriptions on the Salem witch trials, which is actually what he's known for is his descriptions of the Salem witch trials. Okay? Which is, according to Zuckerman, biased. The other thing was on the escape of Hannah Dustin. Hannah Dustin got captured by some natives, blah, blah, blah. He also writes the early history of Harvard College in this thing and talks about Puritan slaveholders should do more to convert their slaves to Christianity. Okay, blah, blah, blah. That's what the 7 books read. So, we have John Cleve Sims, okay, connected to the writings. I'm going to start walking around. Get away from the computer for a minute. Connected to the writings of Edmund Haley based on the opinion of Cotton Mather. Does anybody find any of this odd?
Oh, for sure.
Now, why would that at all be important to the history and development of mentalism in the United States? Because John Cleve Sims was one of the first guys that went around talking about unusual paranormal phenomena, or what we would now consider paranormal, or pseudoscientific phenomena in the United States, which later the mentalists will take up a role and do things like mind reading based after spiritualism, which comes out of Mormonism, which comes out of treasure seers and treasure diggers of New England. Everything I've told you tonight is verifiable. All these things culminate up prior to 1925. Now, 1925, again, is when Houdini writes that atrocious work, A Musician Among the Spirit World, which is complete crap, right? Because what you had in this country prior to Houdini's abomination work is a country that was basically divided into religious beliefs, either of a secular or paranormal nature. Right? So we got this
right.
John Cleve's cat running around the country in the 1700s talking about the Hollow Earth, right? This Hollow Earth theory gives rise to a lot of the crap that later Blonsky would be writing about, or Alcott, I should say, would be writing about, or any number of the other gurus that, you know, like Alice Bailey, Manly P. Hall talks about it, and so forth, right? Now, all these things become early influences on mentalism. Well, because mentalism included at this time includes astrology, graphology, psychic readings, right? All the early mentalists did what was known as the Q&A Act, right? Write a question down on a card, and then I'll pick it at random, and I'll hold it to my head and tell you what you're thinking. And then give you answers to your question. All of this comes about prior to 1925. The Fox sisters, the Davenports. Now, some of these guys did go on and work on to the ghost scene, spiritual manifestations, which comes out of fraudulent spiritualism, which actually is never documented by any of the early spiritualists. Did you catch that? Most of the real early spiritualists never talked about the spiritual manifestations that appear. Mm-hmm. However, what they do talk about is what later became a form of channeling, right? Spirit mediumship. The medium takes on the preparations of the spirit. Mm-hmm. So the whole idea of ectoplasm and all that other crap that was propagated around 1925, this is later, right? 1880s, we didn't have any crap. None of it existed. Now, some of it did exist in Ohio, right? Some of it did. Granted, I mean, there's plaster hands that were found, at the Coons estate and stuff. Some of it got to be a little shady. But when you looked at John Tippy, where Coons got some of the ideas to build a spirit cabin, comes with one of his daughters, none of that hokey shit was going on. Right?
Wow. Yeah.
But we know how Coons ends, right? Now, Coons ends, near Mount Nebo, Ohio, with the villagers coming at him with torches to tar and feather his ass and, burn him down and run him out of town in the middle of the night. Because Coons always ended every seance with, Jesus Christ is the only begotten Son of God. Okay? Yet, he was doing spirit writing. That's primarily what he did. Now, later, the accounts would get a little convoluted. Buckland said there were some spirit hands in play. That's Raymond Buckland, by the way, another Ohio native, may have actually been. We don't know for sure. You know what I'm saying? Because the documentation is kind of scarce. And then Coons, after they burn him out, he goes and runs around the country as a traveling minister. Did you know that?
No, I didn't know that.
Yeah, this is in about 1851, 52. He's running around prior to the Civil War as a traveling minister, preaching spiritualist beliefs and other things. So it's all very, very interesting. But I had to go through a lot of the documentation because I'm going to talk about a lot of these guys later on and how they contributed to this effect, that effect, and so forth. The problem is it's not one story. Right? Everybody thinks mentalism comes out of spiritualism, right? You with me there?
Oh, yeah.
But spiritualism comes out of some European form of mesmerism. That's completely bullshit in the United States. It does not, because spiritualism does not come out of mesmerism. Spiritualism comes out of something far more bizarre. Okay, so let me ask you, where in 1848 do three, church-going young girls learn about ghosts?
Spiritualist camps.
No, in 1848. This is the Fox sisters.
Oh, yeah.
Where do three church-going girls learn about ghosts in 1848? I mean, that's odd. You don't see that shit popping up in Kansas in 1848. Although they weren't quite in Kansas. But you don't see it in New York in 1848. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Young girls were taught to do what? Read the Bible, sew, cook. Take care of the home stuff, right?
Yep.
The guys who worked farms. Where do they learn about ghosts?
Where else?
Where else? They're 6 miles away from Palmyra, New York, which is about 3 to 4 miles away from the Hill of Cumorah. They got the idea of the ghost and the spirit world from hanging out in Palmyra, New York, which is a few miles away from the Hill of Cumorah, where Joseph Smith found the plates of brass, and in the sacred grove he's conjuring up spirits using his father's Mars dagger, his ring, wearing a seal of Psalm amulet that all come out of Francis Barnett's The Magnus, which is a book that was owned by his father, right? At the time of his death, the dagger is given to his brother Hiram. He's using that dagger to cast a black magic circle to summon a spirit. In this case, it was the spirit of the angel Moriani, or Mormon, or whatever it was. You see what I'm saying? That's where the girls got the idea of spirits. Right. They didn't get it from the Puritans, okay, that were, in the area. There's Palmyra's interesting because it's got 4 churches, right? It's got a Methodist church, a Catholic church, a Protestant church, and a Baptist church, all on the 4 corners, right in the center of town. Now, Joseph Smith was constantly at heads with these ministers, right? All of them, especially the Methodists and the Presbyterians. Up to Powell, that later would found the Bureau of Ethnological Research for the Smithsonian Institution. His father was a Methodist minister in Palmyra, New York. Squire, whose son is E.G. Squire of Squire and Davis, that would write the book Mounds of the Mississippi, right? Ancient Discoveries in the Mississippi, and it gives away to modern archaeology. Well, modern archaeology gets birthed out of this place too. And how do we know this? Well, it's because of a guy named Josiah Priest, who is a madman. Right? He's writing about ancient Native American mounds. There's more to this story, by the way. I'm just going to give you the highlights of the story, okay? Both Squire and fathers, Squire and Powell fathers were ministers in Palmyra, New York, around the time Joseph Smith was there. Okay? Smith takes most of his ideas from a guy named Simmons, I believe. A book called The Manuscript Found, I think. That's what the original publication was, an unpublished manuscript. Somehow, Oliver Cowdery gets a hold of a copy of this, gives it to Smith. Oliver Cowdery and Josiah Priest were best friends, okay? Josiah Priest was a friend of Oliver Cowdery, who was a friend of Davis, of Squire and Davis, for archaeology. Now, if you guys are following American archaeology or what's, the mound cultures or anything like that, that's a big one, right? Because you have the Sims report and Manuscript Found that talks about this ancient culture of Diluvian kings or Magahan kings or something like that, which later gets maybe translated by Joseph Smith as the Nephites in the Book of Mormon. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, this is where it gets really bizarre, because if we take it back a little further, we come out of Vermont. The same area of Vermont, by the way, that Joseph Smith married his wife. Joseph Smith Sr. married his wife, right? That's where he gets the copy of the Book of Magnus. But that's not the interesting thing. Also out of this area of Vermont comes this little cult called the Treasure Diggers, or Treasure Seers. Seer. S-E-E-R. Remember seers? The early form of psychics? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, apparently in Vermont, in New England, basically, there's this group called the Treasure Diggers. Now, what these guys do is they look into seer stones or use dowsing rods to find lost treasure. Where? In Indian mounds. That is the early foundations right there in America, which comes out of the ideas of, get this, John Cleves Sims and the Hollow Earth. When you go back and look into the cult of the Treasure Diggers, and you're not going to find much online, you'll have to go to real libraries. It's just the way it is. This Treasure Digger cult is raging, right, by the same period that Cotton Mather's running around, right? I mean, this cult literally gets back to areas of Massachusetts, outside of Massachusetts, where they're actually doing treasure digging. Guys are going, hey, there's treasure over there that's found. I can prove it with this rock. Look at my magic rock. And they pull up treasure. Out of these mounds. Which goes back to Cotton Mather. Right? See, it's not one story. It's multiple stories moving along at the exact same time period. Although there is certain roots that are earlier, like Cotton Mather, right? running around the esoteric work of Edmund Halley's Hollow Earth theory, which never really takes off. Okay, which gets picked up by John Cleese Sims, which writes about the Hollow Earth in 17 whatever, and then he's running around the country. Thomas Jefferson's over there in his area, President Thomas Jefferson, digging up Indian mounds at his estate. Okay? Now, he's not even talking to anybody about it. He's just doing it. Then later he sends Lewis and Clark out for the westward expansion and all that stuff, right? It's all connected. So the story of mentalism and how it comes out of some really obscure and strange stuff. I'm just going to give you a little teaser now, because I know we've been going a while. But there's no real origin point. You see what I'm saying?
Uh-huh.
There's no real origin point. But there is. But the origin point is like literally diversified over multiple areas and multiple times. Some of it comes out of Mary Baker Eddy stuff. Some of it comes from Cotton Mather back in the 1600s in Salem witch trials. Some of it comes out of this. Some of it comes out of Mormonism. Some of it comes out of the treasure diggers. Now, bear in mind, I'm not talking about the magicians. I'm only talking about charlatan mentalism, actually. Right? With the Salem witch trial, ties to Harvard College, the Society for Physical Research. Get it?
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of it comes out of this physical research stuff. Okay? But physical research comes out of, and this is only from 1880 to 1855, or 1924, 25. A lot of that comes out of the idea for the reason we need spiritual research or physical research comes out of the ideas that were laid down by the Mormons and the spiritualists and later Christian Science. And which is actually basically pilgrim stuff, right?
Right.
Pilgrims.
Mm-hmm.
Because when we go back to look at the pilgrims, what we see in the pilgrims, right? They're using dowsing rods. How do you know where to dig the well? As soon as it came off the boat, they're using these technologies, or these pseudo-technologies is what we call them today. Dowsing rods were very popular in pilgrim times. So were cedar stones. Cedar stones would later lead to the rise of Mormonism because Cowdery, actually Oliver Cowdery was a dowser for years. You know, and then Cowdery goes on to do other things. I mean, this story gets really dark and convoluted, but a lot of what you see later on in mentalism, right, comes out of this early form of La Revue Spirita, the Review of Metaphysics. It comes out of France, you know. I mean, it does go back from America to France, you know, in those works I just mentioned, the whole review. We're going to see a lot of it coming out of concepts out of India, Australia. But I'm going to try to focus on just the American aspects of it. Because if I don't focus on the American aspects, you won't understand what happened in the elements, right? Okay, questions?
No, that was pretty clear.
Yeah. Also, I want to say one thing. A lot of the people will refer to occult, psychic, spiritual realms, and so forth in the terms of hands of the seekers of truth, or hands out for the seekers of truth, which is an interesting idea, right? A lot of this stuff gets into crystal gazing, crystal scrying, the idols and dreams theories, and so forth. Well, a lot of what mentalism became never started as mentalism, right?
Right.
Because if you can tie the spiritualists, where do they get the idea for ghosts? To, say, hypothetically, the Mormons, right? The foundation of the Mormons in Palmyra, New York. Then spiritualism doesn't start the whole ball of wax rolling. It goes back to the Mormons, and it gets really bizarre from there. I mean, I can't even tell you how bizarre that story is. I mean, I can give you some bombshells, but I can't actually give you, like, you know, how bizarre that story really is, because when you look at this whole concept of physical investigation, psychic investigators, psychiatric clinics, it's all the thing is, the whole thing is tied together to these weird societies and this weird convoluted attitudes, you know? These new philosophies are popping up all over the place in the 1800s. I mean, we're not talking about just like in one particular spot, although a lot of it does, for the purposes of modern mentalism, stem out of Palmyra, New York. But then it transfers to, how long have I been going?
Let's see here. About 2 hours and 40 minutes.
Okay. Well, let me drop a couple other. You know, a lot of this stuff, we'll get into this later, because I'm not going to get into it in depth now. Because we just don't have time. We're already running along. But you can see where, we'll get into this next time, because it has to do with some interesting events of displacement in Kirkland, Ohio. Which lead to some very interesting stuff. Which leads back to more, you know, ideas of mentalism. But yeah, I mean, it's so, the story is so convoluted and so bizarre. No wonder anybody wanted to look at this. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Because I just spent, I don't know how many hours on who's who. And that's only like maybe 5-10% of the players in the game. That leads up to modern mentalism, the idea of the modern state act. But, you know, when we look at a theatrical performance, we can trace this back to a guy named John Cleese Sims that was talking about the Hollow Earth. He was one of the first big entertainer lecturers of his time in this country. The idea of the lecturer, you know, talking about weird events, outside of, like, you know, I'm Captain Blah and I traveled the lands of, you know, Borneo or some shit, right?
Mm-hmm.
Outside of that, the first interesting and strange and bizarre primordial lecture on anything strange was John Cleese Sims Jr., talking about the Hollow Earth. Now, later, by the 1920s, a lot of the mentalists would be doing this like lecture thing when they're not actually doing mentalism, right? A.K.A. Edward Carrington, which all has roots back in the day. You see what I'm saying?
Uh-huh.
So it's not. So what I'm pissed off about, and I'll give you this straight, it's not all spiritualism.
No.
You know, to blame everything on spiritualism is, one, idiotic, and two, stupid, and it doesn't mean you know what you're talking about. Because it's not all spiritualism. It comes out of, you know, because spiritualism comes out of Mormonism, or where the hell did that shit come from? Right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, that comes out of the treasure diggers of Vermont, because all of them were, you know, at that time, broke, poor, needing money, and they're looking for lost treasure. And how are they divining lost treasure? They're divining lost treasure because they're contacting spirits to speak to them through the magic rocks. Get you some of that.
Wow.
Well, shit. By the time Smith hits Kirkland, you know, they tar and feather his brother a few months earlier. Then they go and turn Sidney Rigdon and him, right? They tar and feather Joseph Smith, And there's a couple different accounts of this depending on which book you're reading, right? I happen to be reading one currently from 1852, and a young kid walks in and goes, that was one of the members of the group that tarred and feathered him, and he goes, "I think I killed him." Talking about Joseph Smith Jr.
Mm-hmm.
Now, after that event, right, I think Smith was dead. Dead. I think they replaced him. Because, now, there's a reason to say that. That story's so goddamn bizarre, it's not even funny. And the reason I say that is there's a couple early pictures of what Joseph Smith looked like that are completely different from the pictures after that event.
Mm-hmm.
I think they replaced him. Because after Kirkland's when all the shit hit the fan with the banks. But that has something to do with the later story of mentalism, but we'll get into that in more detail. But right now I just want to lay claim to that one. It's fuck them.
Yeah.
Because it's hardcore. I mean, the whole story of mentalism has to do with the story of the United States, or at least the U.S. mentalism, has to do with the early hidden history, psycho-spiritual history of the United States. But it's not just one story, right? Because we're going all the way back to the Salem witch trials, which give rise to this, which gives rise to the Puritans, which will later become part of the Protestant Revolution, the rise of the Methodists, the rise of the Campbellites, and the rise of a bunch of other groups. All out of this burned-over district in New York. So, I mean, the whole idea what I want to point out tonight is that mentalism could not have started from spiritualism because spiritualism didn't start from spiritualism. Right? It wasn't a spontaneous event. This is big news. It was a buildup of things that happened 20 years prior in the same area. And then, archaeology branches off. You got two schools of archaeology. You got the ancient cultures, and then you get the new school of archaeology. It was like, the Indians are idiots. Yeah, that's not true. So you get these multiple levels of cover-up, and then you got connections to Schroeder Davis in the same town. In the same town, you have the foundations, the Morgan affair, right, where they kill Henry Morgan. And those were guys that were Freemasons. They killed Henry Morgan because he thought he was going to publish an essay book, right? But, the rest of those guys, the same guys, were also members of the Mormon faith.
Wow.
That gives rise to the anti-Mormon movement, which gives rise to the Whig movement, which gives rise to the Republican Party.
Mm-hmm.
Well, one of the offshoots of that was part of the what gave rise to mentalism. And on the other side of the token, what else happened in the Palmyra, New York that's also freaking interesting? I can't stand it. The anti-Mormon League started up. Right? Which was the other half of the Freemasons that weren't Mormons that were pissed off at the Mormons. Because you had the Methodists that were pissed off the Mormons. And then, both of those Protestants and Methodists both have guys that play prominent roles, whose sons play prominent roles in American archaeology, which was based on some pseudo-fact, based on some just crazy stuff. Which gives rise to more mentalism. Allah, and we'll get into that the next time, a book written in 1828, which I actually own now, which is one of the, what is this one called? It's by Josiah Priest, 1828 copy. A View of the Expected Christian Millennium by Josiah Priest. I have a 4th edition published in 1828 with the original chart of life. But that chart of life is monumentally important to certain viewpoints that were laid down later that would be somewhat, in a way, lead to the development of physical research, or in this case, what would be now called psychic research. So what you have, I'll tell you right now what you have, and I'll tell you why we'll do this periodically over the year. We're not going to do it all at once. What you have is multiple factions pushing multiple agendas, which give rise to the birth of mentalism in this country. Now, we're talking mentalism as in psychic entertainment. We're not talking mentalism as in magic tricks.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I mean, that's a different offshoot. That comes later. Yeah, I mean, is that clear?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Okay, we're approaching the 3-hour mark, so.
Okay.
But I want to get a lot of this context and footnotes out of the way on the audio program. So when you go back and you start reading this stuff, how does this fit into mentalism when you start reading some of the Mary Baker Eddy stuff or the Hayward Carrington stuff or any one of the other guys I mentioned? You'll start seeing the connections immediately, right? Because you're in the know as a you'll start seeing like, oh, wait, is that the development of that damn routine? Fuck.
Yeah.
Never using that again.
Yep.
But then you have you also have the prelude to the rise of all this stuff, which gives rise to all the American mediums, all the American, there's a medium on every corner thing. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Right? Well, he knew he was crying about. So there's a reason why he got into what he got into, but there's not necessarily a reason why it wasn't real or it didn't exist. No, it existed, and it was far wider spread than everybody thought it was. And that's just in 1925, man.
Wow.
I mean, picture, how do I explain this correctly? Picture the number of bars in your area where you live, okay? There's probably 2 times that number of mediums. It was literally at one point church, medium, bar. That's how prevalent it was.
Wow.
You know what I'm saying? Just about every area in town or every big town would have mediums all over the place. And they'd usually be located, that's why I was pointing out some of the locations, next to the churches, next to the bars, next to the hardware stores, et cetera, et cetera. Now, a lot of them, granted, were running smaller offices. But you also had a lot of publishing houses that popped up, right? And there's equally as many publishing houses publishing this literature, and there's literally tens of thousands of books on the subject. You know what I'm saying? You physically cannot read them all. God knows I've read about 4,000 or 5,000 now. It's fascinating. But, if you want some documentation, let me give you some documentation. This is a book published in London in, my eyesight's going down. I don't know if I can rebuild it anymore. 1852, published at 227 Strand, called The Mormons and the Latter-day Saints, A Contemporary History. Illustrations are by a guy named Frederick Percy. It was written by, I might have it written down now. And this is important. Because I made some exorbitant claims. You might as well know what they mean. Here's my first page. Oh, yeah. You wouldn't believe how many of the names of Mormonism pop up back into the new modern mentalism either. That would just knock your socks off. You know what I'm saying? 1852. I don't have it. Yeah, the 1852 count. I have the count. But let me give you the quick version. Yeah, I'm still writing all that out because it's complicated, man. Complicated. 1852 book. I think it was written by Wendell. Don't quote me on that. But on page Yeah. On page 32 is a little bust portrait by the Ganahan family, or Gahn family, G-A-H-A-G-A-N. The famous European sculptor family did some really great and very accurate portraits of people in stone. The whole family's, I'm going through documenting the family history now. The whole family is, what do you call it? Sculptors, basically. But the busts that are listed by this Piercy guy is also a very noted illustrator of the day, very good quality illustrator, by the way, very accurate. Shows early portraits of Joseph and Hiram, and it both look different than later portraits. And these portraits that were done were been done before Kirkland, Ohio. After Kirkland, the image of Joseph Smith and all the literature changed. And that can only mean one thing.
Right.
Yep, they replaced him. Thought to me. I don't want to, go to conjecture, but it's not. Which means all the craziness that happened after that is why we have all the craziness after that. Well, it's not that we didn't have craziness before. And there's not attack on any one religion, okay? Just because, you got spiritualism coming out of Mormonism coming out of treasure diggers, and a few other, shady organizations, doesn't really mean anything, in the big picture of it. We're not attacking your religion, we're just presenting facts that connect to the foundations of mentalism. Because the foundations of mentalism in Ohio, area where Jonathan Coons is at, we'll get into all that later, but it's freaking bizarre, man. When you dive into it and looking for very specific things, you will not find every detail. You know what I'm saying?
Mm.
But I can tell you with 100% certainty, all the crap that like Harry Houdini and all the other early ones were preaching was a propaganda agenda that had absolutely nothing to do with the foundations of anything. And I think I just proved that by some of the documentation I've given you tonight. But I think we're going to cut this part 1 off, and we're going to go into part 2 in a couple of months. So,
cool. Awesome.
I want to give you guys some time to catch up and do some freaking research.
Exactly.
So they don't make stupid comments like, what was the one I read recently? Hang on. I got thirst. Oh yeah. People still believe in ESP, spiritualism, real psychics, horoscopes, and other such nonsense. Let me tell you about that. Real quick there, Bozo, if you're listening to this. They've existed for thousands of years, man. There is more documentation on real psychics, horoscopes, and astrology than there is on the anti-agenda of all that. Okay?
Yep.
Really? Yeah, there is more documentation that stuff is real than that stuff is fake. Literally 10 million pages have been written on it, and maybe 1 million have been written on the other end, the fake end. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Now, I'm going to tell you something. I'm going to make one last statement and we'll end. Both sides are fake. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
The anti, psychic side and the real psychic side. Both sides are riddled with fraud.
Mm-hmm.
So, just because somebody's saying it's not real doesn't mean that he's not pushing an agenda, that he's not telling a bunch of lies too.
Right.
The truth actually lies somewhere in the middle, right?
Mm-hmm.
Down a rabbit hole that's so fucking bizarre, it's not even funny. I mean, I only covered a little tidbit of this. Tiny little, this is like chapter 1, maybe. Or maybe a footnote in chapter 1. But, I mean, that's how involved the story is, because the story doesn't become apparent until you've seen a lot more data. Now, once you've seen a lot more data, you're like, oh, God, it's really as bad as I thought it was. No, it's far worse. It's far worse.
Mm-hmm.
Because, like, when you read up on this John Cleave Sims Jr. guy, right?
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the places he was speaking at early on, relate to a lot of the early psychics. They picked up on it. It all comes out of these traveling lectures at this time and the books that were written, right? That's the documentation trail, is the guys that were traveling around the country doing an act, basically, or maybe proposing an actual scientific theory. Maybe that scientific theory was fake. Maybe it was real. The problem is we're never going to know what's true and what's not, okay? But what we do have is a large body of information that we can actually take a look at and go, no, I don't think so. Let's look at this. Now let's look at this. See, the argument's both-sided. The argument is like, three sides of a coin. And the problem is there's very little truth in either side of the argument. I think both sides of the argument are about as fake as you can get, right? Because I can argue for days on, yes, it's real, and I can also argue on days, yes, it's fake. Depending on what particular aspect you're talking about. If you're just narrowing it down to one aspect, well, that aspect on both sides is probably going to be fake, okay? But you look at it as a convoluted, jumbled mess that is the foundations of, this thing we call mentalism. Man, it's not at all what you thought it was. There's ties to the hollow earth. There's ties to conjuring spirits. There's ties to this. There's ties to that, right? There's ties to switching people, making one dude vanish. There's murders in here. There's all kinds of craziness. We got one of the wildest stories that has ever been told, leading up to a guy walking on a stage saying, I can read your mind. How freaking cool is that?
Yep. Very, very cool.
But yeah, it's not at all what you thought. And most people won't do any research. So I'm going to provide some research data. After all, this is a Psicast, so we might as well just blow it up right here. Yeah, and I got all the documented proof I need for everything I say. So, not making it up. It's fact, dude. Somebody wrote it down 100 years ago. Now, a lot of these things, this is also what I read to create new ideas for metamentalism, too, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not reading the stuff after 1925. Wonder why.
Right.
Because even Hayward Cohen just started switching up what he's writing. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
So why would you read any of that? Well, everybody's trying to make money. Remember, mentalism is about making money. Read Nelson.
Yep.
Chapter 3, Encyclopedia of Mentalism. But, there's, now, I will say one thing. Magic books and their crediting is laughable.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Right.
Because they're not going to credit the guy that they learned the effect from. They're not going to go back and credit the guy that guy learned the effect from or that guy learned the effect from. So there seems to be a lot of data that gets missed. When you get into the bucket list publishers, that ran rampant in the 1800s,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of that are publishing works or republishing works by guys from like Professor and the team without listing their actual names, okay? Professor Andertine is one of the early mentalists that we'll talk about later that starts running in the 1840s to 1860s. And you'll never guess where he's coming out of. Yeah. It's unbelievable, dude. It's unbelievable how much of the stuff is connected to these weird areas, these weird people, these strange and curious circumstances that lead up to this big convoluted story of the real history of mentalism in America.
Wow.
I know we're over 3 hours.
Yeah, pretty close to it, so.
But we're definitely not doing this all the time, so too bad it's so sad.
Yeah. Cool. All right. Then that ends this audio portion of Psicast, and we will see you guys next time for the next Psicast, and we will see you guys later.